didn't do what I told them to. My skin was melting, my armor was screwed, and I'd lost my rifle. My head spun even worse, and all I could think of is the corrective training I was going to catch for getting messed up.
Hello again. I think you can hear me. Oh, I hope so. Let's see. Yes, it seems that it's working. Anyway, that's my Coyote. I did start on it last time I was on, and I am back to it. Let me see if I can... Oh, what's actually... Let me clean it up a little. Yeah, a little cleaner, I think. And I'm going to put a little of this stuff for the glare. And that's the way it looked like. It looked cool actually. Anyway, I'm going to continue to do the body of my beast. I think I'm going to make it a little darker on the neck first. Anyway, that's what I'm going to do. And of course I'm going to listen my audiobook in the same time.
Been losing my rifle. Man, the staff sergeant's going to have my ass. Shots punched the air above my head, making fast-forward noises like a tiny ground transport zipping by too fast to see. The kid raised his Mark 6 and started thumping rounds back down range, just like he'd been taught to. And the sight of him mesmerized me for a second. Fuck yeah, Marine. Get some. Get the sons of bitches. My stunned moment of admiration shattered when he took a round to the right hip that sent him bending and turning before a second hit took him in the left shoulder to flatten him out hard on his back. His legs were bent under his ass and his torso was twisted to the left, grotesquely. Grotesquely? Why the hell am I using big words? He looks like shit and fell down like a bag of damn bones. His rifle fell beside him and I looked at it, feeling somehow as though he'd still be alive if only I could pick it up and keep that part of him in the fight. My legs twitched, but still didn't want to do what I told them, so I started to drag my sorry ass toward it with my hands. Pain lanced throughout my whole body and my vision started to go all fucking fuzzy at the edges, but I kept crawling toward it as the air around me filled with the sound of thrumming, angry, zipping noises. Tungsten bullets, my brain told me, like the kind of munitions mattered when I was half paralyzed and only had busted armor and a sidearm to my name. The screaming whine of turbojets drowned out the sound of the rounds as the dull yellow light from the system's sun was blocked out by the arrival of a rapid transport that slammed into the dirt to raise a cloud of grit and dust all around me, making my shitty day even worse with a face full of sand. Helomedics jumped out, scattering out of the open side as the door gunner cranked back on the Mod 1 Heavy and started to stitch bursts behind me. A medic, the red cross on the shoulder plate of his armor looking as if it had been drawn in blood like a damn finger painting, stopped to check the kid. He shook his head and pointed at me, joining another of his Helomed buddies as they yanked me up under my armpits. "My rifle," I said weakly, my voice sounding like someone else's. "Can't lose my rifle." The medic under my left arm cursed, but I didn't hear the words. I mean, I totally got his point. There he was risking his ass to save some dumb grunt who's all like, "Hey, can we swing by my place to grab a few things?" What the fuck? You're losing it, Barton. He bent to scoop up the kid's rifle in his hand, and the two of them propelled me toward the transport where they threw me in behind the door gunner. He was still hammering away like he only paid for a half hour and wanted his money's worth. I didn't see what he was shooting at. I didn't want to see what the fuck he was shooting at, but I knew what they were. At least, I knew what they looked like, but I didn't have the first fucking clue what they were. Not anymore. It wasn't possible, but sure as shit, that's what went down. I saw it with my own eyes. I didn't know what happened or how it happened, but I knew it was real because I'd been there and seen it myself. The guy I thought was the crew chief dragged me in and threw a strap over me, forcing the rifle into my hand and squeezing my gloved fingers to shout in my face and tell me not to let it go. He pushed up off me and raised the submachine gun to fire out the open hatch. His armor was different. His shoulder didn't bear the medic's sigil, but had crossed axes and no rank badges. That was the last thing I saw before the world went dark and the pain stopped. Chapter 1. 6 hours earlier, Corporal Mike Barton, CSMC. Barton, get your lazy ass up. Move! Staff Sergeant Wendell Havelock bawled about an eighth of an inch from my ear. Whether I was an acting squad leader or not, the guy was skating on thin fucking ice with how he talked to people. If he'd been a sergeant, or I hadn't still been a corporal, I'd have considered reading the guy's damn horoscope in some dark corner. But if life had taught me one thing, it was to pick my battles. Out here, this far away from Earth, assholes like that got away with treating people like shit. Right up until the moment they didn't. I'm up, I groaned, flopping my head forward and counting down from 3 until I forced my eyes open one at a time, then both together to curse the day I fell for the recruiter's bullshit. Man, I hated jump sleep, even if I did get to see the galaxy. Every wake-up felt like the biggest, craziest bachelor party ever. In fact, I'd been on a bachelor party where I'd woken up not knowing where the hell I was, only to find out a few of us actually crossed the border into Mexico without our passports. But this was still worse. Every damn time. It didn't get easier at all, in spite of the bullshit we were sold when we signed on. Even the older guys gave up telling us we'd get used to it, because it fucked them up just as much every time. Now, Corporal Barton, you piece of shit, move, move, move! I moved. I didn't even feel hurt by that particular insult because I felt like a piece of shit. Anyone who described jump sleep like a light hangover was an asshole. The staff sergeant barking in my face was an asshole. Hell, I was an asshole for signing up in the first damn place. Moving, Staff Sergeant? I answered, working my lips and running my tongue over my teeth like they were stuck together with peanut butter, imagining the day I could sign my way right out of the Corps and frame my DD-214 on a wall somewhere permanent. Preferably somewhere I could see it when I woke up naturally with nobody screaming in my face, so I probably shouldn't marry a stripper in a hurry. Maybe moving wasn't all that accurate. I was stumbling, like the ship's artificial gravity was off and it was trying to pull me in a sideways loop. Like if I was in an open space and not enclosed in there, I'd just keep going in a big circle. Slamming into my locker, I opened it on the third try like a drunk trying to get in the house quietly and reached inside for my camis. Already the cold of the floor was burning my feet through my socks and making me do a little dance from one foot to the other so they didn't get too cold. They kept our sleep tubes at a temperature that a human could survive when the ship was locked down, but everywhere else dropped down real low and took a long time to level out. Space is seriously fucking cold. Trousers and blouse on, I sat on the cold floor to slip on my boots and nearly tripped the guy stumbling past me. "Hey, Corporal, you trying to kill me?" PFC Cook said as he tried to avoid my legs and ended up spinning off to slam into the tube I'd been taking a nap in. "Sorry, kid," I said, dragging myself to my feet and tugging him back upright. "You know, it would make more sense if they let us come around in our own time. I mean, an hour wouldn't kill anybody, right? You think the officers get screamed at until they're recovered?" Cook complained, his Boston accent making the complaint sound even more indignant. He had a point, But seeing as how he'd come out on the last batch of recruits to join the company, he was still in the mindset of being on Earth where a Marine could run a grievance up the chain of command and not find himself guarding the female head wearing just his shorts for 18 months straight. This is the Combined States Marine Corps. Don't confuse it with an organization that gives a fuck what you think makes sense, kid. I told him as I propelled him ahead of me into the parade deck. It wasn't actually used for parades, but it was where the 3 squads of our platoon assembled. In 2 other sections of the ship, another 6 squads were gathering and probably feeling just as fucked up as we were. What are you waiting for? A signed invitation? Move your fat ass, PFC cook, before I spit on my dick and remind you of your uncle visiting at Christmas. Staff Sergeant Havelock yelled, perpetuating the myth that the son of a bitch could hear people talking shit about his beloved Corps through a vacuum. Cook perked up and jogged ahead of me like he'd drunk too much and only slept for an hour before morning PT. I knew that jog because I'd done it more than once in my life. Every Marine had. The kid was new, but he was smart. This was his first time afloat, so I cut him some slack because he was 100% right about nobody else having to wake up to threats of violence. I mean, we were a resource, so it didn't pay to intentionally screw up one of your resources just because you didn't feel like giving it 5 minutes to get its bearings, right? It was one of those things. Like the fact that I'd ended up leading a squad by default in an unhappy platoon under a baby-faced butterbar LT and a staff sergeant with a permanent hard-on for making us sweat. It was like the motherfucker fed on being hated. We fell in, the other Marines of our squad looking just as queasy as we did, and tried to stand still as Havelock paced along our line with a straight back wearing boots, cami trousers, dog tags, and an expression of pure fucking hatred. Sorry excuses for Marines, he growled, trying to sound disappointed but unable to hide the fact that he loved every second spent giving us shit. You take a 3-week-long nap, and all I ask of you is that you get your well-rested asses out of bed to stand on my ready line when I say so. Attention on deck, a voice barked from behind him, but he was already stamping to attention like he had an inbuilt electronic warfare suite that could detect an officer from half a click away. That's what I hated about Havelock the most. He was an evil son of a bitch to everyone below his rank, and that included second lieutenants unless another officer was around. At ease, Captain Prescott said as he strode in confidently, walking fast ahead of the lieutenants and the first sergeant. Listen up. As of 0841, we entered an active conflict zone. A little over 3 weeks ago, a colony on some back-ass planet out here sent a distress call on wideband frequency. Our good friends in the NRC did us a favor and responded first, but they haven't been heard from after mission deployment 6 days ago. Total radio silence. It kept my face neutral while my mind raced. I'd heard the scuttlebutt about this being an SOS investigation before we took a nap. That was simple enough to understand. But finding out we had troops from the new Russian Confederacy in the mix did not make me feel very comfortable. Honestly, I preferred the deployments where we didn't have to do anything, not even stand guard and open up on whatever natural predator took too close of an interest in the colonists. To be clear, there is no indication that the NRC are hostile in this sector, as the claims here are undisputed. But we will deploy, we will investigate, and we will respond accordingly. Gear up, we drop in 2 hours. He turned away, leaving the first sergeant to call us to attention. Eyeballing each squad in turn, he bawled the words to dismiss us and followed the officers. Carry on. Immediately, our platoon leaders started barking at us, hurrying us up to get into our gear. Come on, kid. With me, I said, turning the boot and propelling him to the ready lockers. Our depleted uranium armor was designed to be put on by the user in quick time without assistance. Now, anyone who served knew that obviously meant that it was impossible to get it right by yourself unless you had like 4 fucking elbows or something and you could see through your ass. Which is why we perfected the buddy system through hours and hours of endless repetitive drills. Good old-fashioned, honest-to-God, mind-numbing, never-ending fucking drills. The kid slipped on his vest and arm bracers, all shiny and new, leaving them unfastened while he pulled the leg pads up over his boots to cover his thighs. I did the same, not bothering to even attempt the clips out of experience, until we were both standing there with our protective gear hanging off us like we'd slept in it. So how come you're the squad leader now? Cook asked. I saw a couple other guys intentionally look away, but I knew they'd be listening to my response. Because Sergeant Foxall contracted an incurable communicable infection, I told him, not looking up as I spoke, in case I smiled. What? Like an alien cold or something? No, kid. It's the kind of disease you catch from going behind enemy lines. Wait, he was deployed? When did we get deployed? Did they leave me asleep? You got a fucking dose, kid, Ramirez said from his locker a half-dozen paces away, ending the torment of having to explain the birds and the bees to the new recruit. A dose of what? Cook answered, proving to me again that an education didn't necessarily mean intelligence. A dose, I said. Dick rot. Crotch critters. He ordered the clam chowder. You know what I'm saying, kid? He looked at me dumbfounded for a second before a childish smirk crossed his face and he colored up while trying to hide a laugh. Guess he missed that safety brief, Cook muttered, not quite having the guts to crack a joke out loud. Dude went into battle without a combat cover. Worse than that, kid, Ramirez laughed, having heard him anyway. You should have seen the fucking size of what he stuck his dick. You geared up yet, Ramirez? I barked, fixing him with a look until he shut up talking and just muttered to himself quiet enough so I could ignore it. Had about 4.5 teeth and an ass like a motherfucking dropship. We took turns clipping the shoulder and arm sections onto our vests, tightening it all up afterwards so that it looked how it was supposed to. The downside of it being in the right place to protect as much of my upper body as it could while still allowing me to move meant that I could breathe at about 80% capacity. Perfect. I mean, come on, it wasn't like the people we worked for liked to make us run everywhere carrying heavy gear or anything. Well, not perfect. If you wanted perfection, you should have recruited a few actual Marines who'd been in combat and asked them how a new armor system should work, instead of asking a bunch of guys looking at the bottom line what they thought a Marine in the field might need if he was the conscientious type who was mindful of budgetary concerns. The kind of people who had to be shown what a Marine actually was. You know the type. Back office assholes. Spoiler alert. Apparently the Marine in the field needed awkward-to-fit armor made in the cheapest way from the thinnest DU possible. But whatever, I digress. When the upper body sections were strapped on tight, we pulled out our belts that incorporated the groin plate and strapped the thigh plates to them before taking an awkward knee and strapping on the lower leg guards that covered our boots right down to the steel alloy toes. The usual round of dick slapping happened while everyone had a real good laugh at the groin protection. Yeah, they looked dumb, but the thought of taking a round where it was, I'd rather take one to the face. Me and the kid stood opposite each other, checking one another out and adjusting straps until the other looked like they were supposed to. Both of us had an empty pistol holster on our right thigh plates, mag carriers for the Mark 30 sidearm on the left, and the half-dozen pouches on the chest plates were ready to take Mark 6 spare rifle ammo. You good? I asked, reaching into his locker and pulling out his combat cover. After handing him the helmet as he tried a few test flexes, he looked me right in the eye, and I swore he was about to shit his skivvies. I'm good, Corporal. Thanks, he said as he hauled his mostly empty pack onto one shoulder. Kid, you want the staff sergeant to put his foot in your ass? I said, reaching back into his locker and pulling out the plasma knife that was missing from the sheath on his chest. He smiled nervously, apologizing like it affected me and not him, and shot a glance at my own. Like a lot of the guys who'd been in a real fight, I wore mine upside down and a little higher on my chest. It was personal preference, and one of the few things the Corps didn't have a damn regulation about. I mean, they did, obviously, but it was one that wasn't really enforced unless we were on parade somewhere. Dressed for war, we still had about an hour and 50 minutes until the reported drop time, and I knew almost all of that would be spent rushing to wait while a tiny portion of it would be spent actually preparing for a drop, and even less time would be informing us what the fuck was going on down on the surface of butt-fuck nowhere random number planet. Armory, move your asses! Havelock yelled, cuffing Marines over their heads if they weren't wearing their covers as they filed past. You pussies need a lion? Want to talk about your damn feelings because the Corps is too tough for your gender-neutral asses? He screamed as if his malice could make us move faster, when Marines in armor took up a lot of space when they bottlenecked through a single doorway. You want to sit on a beanbag and talk about your mommy's titties breastfeeding you? Havelock added, ramping up the abuse like he couldn't stop himself. I hated that man. Not because he gave me shit, but because of the way he went after the younger guys. The kids fresh out of school, straight into boot and packed off out to wherever the fuck we were, before they even needed to shave. A guy like that back on Earth or in the core planets would find himself neck deep in shit, so long as the platoon had an officer who gave a fuck about their people. In that respect, we'd drawn another short straw and won the lottery with some fucking 9-year-old, or however the hell old the LT was. But I'd have felt different about it if I'd been one of those kids who hadn't seen the galaxy much before joining up. Now, I hadn't joined straight out of high school like a lot of the guys had. I'd gone to college. Yeah, I know, why in the fuck was I not giving orders instead of taking them and blah fucking blah. I'm a dumbass, okay? I mean, not literally, but I'd made a few life choices I regretted from time to time. Point is, I didn't know a damn place in the galaxy where a supervisor could make statements like that and not find themselves looking for alternative employment pretty fast unless they were in the military. Here, everything was fair game, whether it was relevant or not. We fell in line, and I kept the kid in front of me. He'd trained for this, just like we all had, but unlike the rest of our squad, he'd never done a real drop before. And I knew from bitter experience how that changed things in just about every way possible. The armory, basically a weapons locker the size of a fast food drive-through window serving our 3 platoons, was in the least obvious and useful place possible. I handed over my MOS card to collect my weapon from where it was locked away in transit. After the guy behind the counter matched the number to the right spot on the rack, he handed over my Mark 6. I knew that serial number as well as I knew my own right hand. And after being out in the far reaches for long enough, well, you know, I knew my hand intimately, but I knew that weapon better. For all the bullshit people believed about the Corps, that rifle was a part of me. I had 7 magazines for the weapon, and at the next window, I filled them fast using the speed loader machines we never saw in training. I mean, that made sense, right? Train to hand load all your magazines because you'd never actually do it for real. Sliding 6 of them with the tungsten projectiles pointing down and tips facing my right in my pouches, I had to awkwardly hold the last one in my not-free hand. Why? Well, because loading a rifle right there would get me so far up on everyone's shit list, I'd be lucky to get out of any punishment without ending up pregnant. With twins. The next guy handed over a Mark 30 pistol, and I loaded my 3 magazines for it. 2 spares went bullets down and points facing backward in the thigh pouches on my left, while the gun went in the holster on my right leg, and the last magazine jostled in my left hand with the rifle mag. It was important to orient my mags so I could just trust my muscle memory to get it right if I was concentrating on other stuff and needed to reload. All of this was like muscle memory, because I'd done it so many times and never had to use either weapon. That kind of thing could make a Marine complacent, unless he had his head screwed on right. Shit like that they taught you, but until you've been crapping your pants and trying to make yourself small enough to fit inside your own ballsack to avoid incoming rounds, the last thing you wanted to be doing was thinking about which damn way the magazine went in the rifle. Trust me. Putting both mags down on the last counter, I slung my rifle and pulled around my pack to fill it with the other shit I had to carry. The radio came next, and I had to plug it into my gear, switch it to whatever channel was written in pen on the filthy square of white that held the channel digits, and run a quick test. The guy nodded to say he'd heard me, and pointed at the second set of digits to give me the deployment squad net. EW Pack 2, okay. I told the guy handing out the gear. He pulled the package off the shelf and lifted the flap to flick a switch. I knew he'd gotten green lights on it because he flicked the switch again and dropped the flap before sliding it to me. The electronic warfare projector, or jammer as the old-timers called it, stayed in my pack along with water and a 48-hour ration pack that was standard deployment gear. If we were down there any longer, the support units would land, gently, like civilized people and not basically thrown out in orbit like the unwanted kids we were, and set up a fob. I hoped I'd be back on board before that ration pack was even open because they put a few wet wipes in there, like eating the stuff in the pouches would actually make you need them, but that wasn't always the case. There was a reason people called them backup packs. The last items were the 2 thorium microreactors that powered both weapons, which went into a separate, tightly secured pouch. Then I filed off to hurry my ass up and wait, eventually filing my way to the front where, under the supervision of a gunnery sergeant, because nobody trusted us to do anything right unless we were being watched, I loaded both weapons with the barrels pointed into the safety bucket before fitting the reactors to them and heading for my boomerang. Chapter 2. Barton. Stand by for drop, the driver's voice said over the speakers in the boomerang. That's what everyone called the modular orbital deployment craft because the ship threw them out and they just came back. Man, I fucking hate this part. A Marine opposite me cursed, locked into his standing harness as if we were all about to go on a fairground ride none of us had volunteered for. The driver didn't hear, or he just ignored it, because he started counting down from 10, probably just to make the anticipation even more agonizing. The boomerangs weren't actual ships, so the pilots were drivers and not real zoomies, like the ones who deployed from the ship to run the combat air patrol around the carrier. I'd heard them being deployed over the boomerang's radio speaker, but their reports were obviously sent via a different channel, so us mere mortals didn't get to hear any real-time intel come back. 7, 6. I pulled a mouthguard out of a pouch and fitted it to my top teeth, moving my lips in exaggerated ways to work it in comfortably before I bit down on it. 3, 2. Beside me, Ramirez let fly with his usual rapid-fire prayer in Spanish so fluidly strung together that it was a single soundbite. 1. Drop. My balls headed north for the summer, and my teeth clenched so hard that the mouthguard flattened a little under the pressure. My first training drop had resulted in a 3-day exercise being cut short by 48 hours because I'd cracked a molar from clenching so hard. The drill instructor decided to call me Keith the Teeth after that, which was a hell of a lot better than some of the names he'd given to the other guys. The Navy dentist gave me a 30-second blast on some gas, then told me he'd take a look before gripping the 2 broken halves together and ripping them out. No expense spared, literally none. I remember thinking that dentist must have been the bravest guy in the whole combined states military, because while everyone else spent their lives gearing us up to kill in various and creative ways, there was this asshole testing our self-control. It was like he wanted one of us to jump up and kill him with his own damn pliers or something. 2 spots to my left, PFC Cook, the kid as everyone called him, was locked in and he seemed okay with everything. The little prick. His head was pressed back as per the manual and his mouth held slightly open. I hope they didn't bite his tongue off when we hit atmosphere because that would be a shitty way to end your first deployment. If they couldn't reattach it properly, they'd give him 3 months' pay and drop him off at the nearest starport with a travel warrant to get home. Eventually. Pushing that thought out of my head, I focused on not throwing up, which meant tensing my stomach muscles hard. Only I couldn't keep that up for the amount of time it took to accelerate toward the atmosphere, so I had to count to 30 and take a big gulp of air before I tensed up again. That gulp was the dangerous part because if my stomach contents really wanted out, that was when they were going to make a break for it. 10 seconds to atmosphere, the driver's voice said, still sounding cool and collected like he did this shit all the time and was already thinking about sinking a nice cold beer when he got back. I tried to count down to 10 seconds but was way off, because when I thought the word 2, the pressure forcing me up into the padded harness reversed to slam the part where my balls should have been into the support between my legs, which only served to jam the groin armor into my thigh. If I was a bigger man, that might have posed more of a risk of serious injury. The rumbling of the boomerang intensified and the temperature inside our section doubled in a second to make my skin prickle with the sudden heat. Of all the millions of dollars the Corps could spend, I just wished a single one of them went on something, just one damn thing that made my life even just a little easier. The intense rumbling as we cooked our way through the atmosphere went on for long enough that I started to breathe faster, like a dog panting to cool down, only I didn't open my mouth and stick my tongue out because I wanted to keep it. It stopped just as suddenly, but that meant we'd broken through in one piece and the wind resistance kicked in to bounce us around like we were going to shake apart. 3 minutes of enduring that was enough to make anyone want to get off, so when the driver started calling out a countdown to landing, I braced myself for the worst part since the initial drop from the carrier. This guy favored the 4-stage flare approach, I noticed, as I fought the simultaneous urges to throw up and shit my pants at the same time. That was better than the jack-offs who liked to pull a 2-stage flare, or the tactical landing, as they called it, because that was a lot of pressure to take in the groin, whether I was wearing a dick plate or not. When the last flare made me certain I was now a half-inch shorter than when I'd started, I was grateful to hit the dirt on whatever shithole back-ass colony planet this was so I could get shit done and get the fuck off it. "All right, ladies, what are you waiting for? A dick punch? Move your asses!" Havelock yelled, like he'd just woken up after the drop had lulled him to sleep. The fact that there actually was one female in the squad and 4 in just our platoon seemed to make no difference to him. It was almost as if he wanted to get court-martialed just so he could get out. I hit the red button above my head with a shaking hand to release the locking mechanism and adjusted my groin plate and balls. I stepped out of the harness and retrieved my rifle from the secure rack beside my seat before strapping it on. Havelock hustled us out of the boomerang and ordered us to dress up as a squad, but the captain strolled out of the nearest boomerang and ordered our LT to take the high ground. The LT gave his orders, pretty much repeating what the captain had told him word for word, only without any of the confidence, and at least 1 octave higher. I felt sorry for the kid, reckoning I was the only one who did. He was young, given a bunch of training seminars telling him he was in charge, and then he landed his baby smooth ass in a unit where guys his own age were hardened killers, and the men supposedly under his command made it obvious they didn't think he knew a goddamn thing. "You heard the man. Ready your weapons and move your asses!" Havelock screamed at us like we were the ones who'd had the idea to line up nice and straight instead of getting the job done. We ran, moving as fast as we could under the loving overwatch of the world's angriest staff sergeant who felt it was his mission to be on our collective case every second of every day. It was tough going, and I guessed I'd missed the part in the briefing where they warned us the gravity was a little heavier than Earth's and the atmosphere was a little lighter on oxygen than I liked. The other 2 squads of our platoon did the same, our 3 units moving independently with the same goal in mind. It felt good to run, to stretch my lungs and my legs after sleeping for so long and waking up to massive tension. Every time we dropped like this, so soon after waking up, inevitably there was a complaint of excessive force or a suspect shooting. Each of those incidents was investigated and usually swept aside, but as I ran, I wondered how many of those would never have happened if they'd just given us another hour to wake up, and maybe an extra cup of coffee before they launched us with high stress levels. The high ground was where a trio of wind turbines sat beside a central converter unit. Taking cover automatically, we scanned the ground all around us, and I saw nothing weird. I mean, at first, I saw nothing weird. Then it dawned on me that I saw nothing at all, which in itself was seriously weird. "Staff Sergeant, how many people are supposed to live here?" I asked. "Excuse me for just a minute while I head down and take a damn census, Corporal. How in the hell should I know?" I ignored Havelock's generic abuse in response to the fact that he didn't have an answer and tried to work it out myself. Housing units lined the north road heading out of the little town. I could see processing units and what I guessed was a quarry in the middle distance, based on the massive dump truck abandoned in the flattened dirt that passed for a main road. So far as I could see, this looked like some version of the Wild West in the outer regions of the galaxy, only instead of land and gold, it was... "Hey, what do they mine here?" I asked Cook. "Neodymium, Corporal," he said, like I had a clue, whatever that was. I guessed it was rare and valuable, otherwise why would whichever corporation that backed this colony have invested the billions of dollars it would take to set up shop here? "And tungsten," he added, giving the magazine of his rifle a loving pat. "Staff Sergeant Havelock, take your squad and clear the buildings from the eastern edge. Corporal Barton, do the same and take one side of the street each," the lieutenant ordered. Havelock glared at the officer for a second before giving a nod and turning his frustration on his squad and mine, like he didn't think I was up to the task of leading them, and he felt responsible for both units. No matter what we did, it wasn't done fast enough. No matter how fast we did something, it wasn't done well enough. I'd served long enough to know that his job was to strive to make us work harder and smarter, but damn if he couldn't vary his approach just once, you know? Try a little carrot instead of all stick. If he just took a few of the guys aside occasionally and helped them out instead of tearing them new assholes for fucking up, then he might earn a little respect. I guessed he was happy enough being feared instead. We moved, tactically this time, as we bounded forward and took cover until the squad eventually stacked up on a wall at the very eastern edge. No bangs, Havelock ordered as he took his squad to the other side of the wide street and counted it down on his fingers. When the fingers had all folded down into a fist, he pumped it down, and we went to work. This was what we trained for. We drilled in the dark, we drilled in the light, we drilled in simulated gravity. We trained room clearance so much that any Marine with more than 3 years service could conduct those drills in their sleep. I stepped in behind the lead Marine, rifle butt out of my shoulder and elbow up high to brace the weapon in case I had to fire it, wishing they'd allow us to carry the shorter barrel version for exactly this kind of situation. I mean, shorter barrel meant less metal, and that would save them money, right? Obviously not. We swept the room, finding it empty in a way that made me think it wasn't so much abandoned, but more like the people had just gone. The next rooms were even smaller, so I slung the Mark 6 and drew my Mark 30 pistol so I could move easier. Clear! Rang out from all around, and we filed back out to stack up and hit the next building in the line. Then the next, and the next, and so on until we were breathing heavily and sweating. We had maybe 10 more housing units to clear before the height and size of the buildings changed, but what got me the most was that these places were so basic. It felt more familiar to the kind of places we slept instead of where civilians rested their heads. There was a small sitting room, 2 bedrooms that looked like they belonged in a $50 motel, and a bathroom to match. No kitchen, no real sense of individuality or comfort. I pushed that out of my head as we worked, clearing the rest of the houses and finding all of them the same. Empty. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle anywhere, and nothing to say that people had packed up and gone anywhere. Clear! Havelock called out from the other side of the road. Clear, I called back. He signaled us to move to his side of the street and run the drills on the next building. It needed the whole squad because, unlike the little living quarters, this one had 2 floors. Once inside, I went left, PFC Cook on my shoulder as we entered a room that felt familiar. It was a ready room, and it looked the same all over the galaxy. The gun rack stood empty save for a single Colonial Mod 18, which was the stripped-down civilian version of what we carried, and the small arms locker was left open. Check that, I told Cook, pointing at the locker. Empty, he said. No ammo. That didn't sit right with me at all. I guessed this was the place where the colony had their own little mercenary squad, like almost all of them did. Mostly these guys were former Army or Marines, but a lot of them were security washouts or police department failures from all over who told stories about conflicts they hadn't fought in. I'd met more than a few mercs in my service, and the sheer number of them who intimated they were former SOG added up to more Tier 1 guys bouncing around the galaxy than there were Marines or Army grunts combined. Mostly they claimed they were part of the Stonemeyer Embassy siege back in 2301, which meant that of the 6 guys the footage showed on the balcony, there must have been closer to 600. The fact that they had a merc house here wasn't strange at all, because a hell of a lot of these colony planets had wildlife issues to deal with before any roving gangs of pirates, but the fact that it was empty and had been cleaned out of all their weapons and ammunition was pretty sus. Secure it, I said, hitting the transmit button and calling Havelock. Send it, the staff sergeant's voice came back, even just being called on the radio apparently making him angry. We've got our weapons cache cleaned out, no sign of trouble, over. Secure it and move on, he ordered. I said nothing past an acknowledgement and carried on clearing the building. We moved upstairs, again the familiar shapes we had to make with our bodies feeling natural, until the empty corridor showed me a couple of closed doors. Pendejo, you smell that? Ramirez said behind me, but I'd already detected the delightful aroma he was talking about. It was not a nice smell. I gave hand signals for my squad to move, and resisting the urge to go straight for the closed doors, we worked our way methodically toward them until the first blocked door leaked the intensified smell through the half-dozen bullet holes punched through it. I tried the handle and shook my head, stepping back for Ramirez to breach it. He had some specialist gear in his ruck to do that, but being the testosterone-fueled Marine he tried the hero method first. It was just an internal door, so it should have given into a boot. It most definitely should have given into the boot Ramirez delivered, but instead of flying open, it just broke around the lock and caved in on impact, but stayed firmly shut. Ramirez kicked again and again and again until the door began to break down in pieces. "Barricaded," I said, stepping back to give him more room to work with the tools he carried. We maintained protection on the corridor until Ramirez tore the door out in two parts and stepped away. I moved in, weapon up and scanning as I kicked the remaining parts of the barricade aside, only for the smell of shit and ammonia to hit me so hard in the face my eyes watered. Another smell overrode that. It was spoiled meat mixed with shit and piss, and I knew what I'd find in there even before I laid eyes on it. The rest of my guys were in behind me, calling the place clear through choked words from the smell. "Kid, secure that weapon," I told Cook. To his credit, he didn't flinch, just lowered his rifle and stepped close to pull the gun out of a dead woman's hand. She was dressed in the filthy remnants of a colony uniform, but not a set of miner's coveralls. The vest she wore was way too big for her, so I guessed she wasn't one of the mercs. Otherwise, her gear would fit. She had shoulder-length hair, which was probably a dirty blonde when it was washed, but it was caked in filth and black blood now. Ramirez leaned over Cook to see her better, muttering another prayer and crossing himself. "Shame. Looks like she was hot," he said, making me feel a little sick. "Yeah, he'd probably still fuck her even now," Bale said from the doorway. "You're sick, man," Ramirez countered. "Maybe a couple weeks ago, though." "Weapons empty," the kid announced, changing the subject before I had to say something to shut the others up. I knew they wouldn't talk like that in front of one of the sergeants, and it pissed me off. I didn't want to be the hard ass and chew them out, but the time for shit talk was not there and not then. "Next room," I said, dwelling on the fact that the woman had evidently opened up on someone trying to get in before saving the last round for herself. Ramirez breached the next door a little more easily, but found nothing. I called up to report the find on the comm. "Secure it and move on," the lieutenant ordered. We carried on, going door to door until we reached the square at the center of the little town, where the captain stood and took the verbal reports from his lieutenants. "Hey," Cook said beside me. I leaned back on the wall, hurrying up to be ready to do the next thing they told us. "What?" "What went on down there? Everyone just disappeared." I shrugged, like it didn't matter to me. It did, only not enough to make me worry about it. "Not everyone." "Yeah, but everyone else did, right? What the hell would make them do that? What was after her that she did herself like that?" He asked insistently, as if the mysteries of the galaxy had to be unraveled by him or else he'd never sleep. "Don't sweat it, kid. Not our place to lose sleep about it," I told him. "Yeah, but..." "Hey, you see those guys there?" I asked, nodding my head toward the captain. "They're paid to stress about it, not us. So ours is not the reason why," he intoned loftily. "You really believe that shit?" I shot him a look designed to remind him that we weren't buddies, and if he didn't want his ass on a punishment detail, he better watch how he talked. "Corporal," he muttered by way of apology. "Hey, you want to cause yourself trouble, you go right ahead. Just don't involve me in it, okay? That means you do it on your own goddamn time and not mine." I told him harshly, hoping he'd stop trying to think too much and just shut up. He pushed himself off the wall like he was going to argue, but he didn't say a word. Following the line of his gaze, I saw the lieutenant walking in our direction. "Our objective is the quarry," he said, somehow making it sound like a question instead of a damn order. "Time to suck it up, kid," I told Cook, as Havelock was already screaming abuse at his squad to move. The quarry was further away than it looked from the high ground, but I guessed that was why we did PT until we were sucking oxygen through our asses every day. The call to hold rippled down the line at the same time it came over the squad net into our helmets. I stopped, waiting to see if we were waiting for the LT to check which way we had to go, or if there was actually something that might interest me, like the need to seek cover from fire in the immediate future. Experience having taught me to preempt these things, I glanced around and chose a small dump truck that had a solid enough looking gear block I could hide behind if the need arose. "Hey, Corporal," Cook hissed at me, making my eyes roll. I wished the kid would attach himself to someone else because his need to ask so many questions was already starting to piss me off. "Barton!" I turned to him, my best shut the fuck up already chambered with the safety off, but one look at his eyes made me stop. He pointed past my feet and I turned my head automatically in that direction but couldn't see what had gotten him spooked. And he was most definitely spooked, with wide eyes and such a pathetic open-mouthed look on his face that I took note. "What?" "Right there," he hissed. I looked, but still didn't see what the fuck he was so concerned about. "Staff Sergeant," he called out in a voice that made him sound even younger than he was, making me wince that he was actually inviting the kind of punishment that would bring with it. "No, PFC Cook, you cannot use the damn head. You should have thought about that before we deployed," Havelock barked as he stomped down the middle of the dusty road toward him. Cook didn't waver, just kept his left hand out straight and pointing at something. "What's the matter? You see a bug? You upset because its dick is bigger than yours?" Havelock froze, his mouth halfway open as whatever vile abuse he was about to deliver was forgotten. "Romeo, Blue 1, he growled into his radio, accidentally transmitting it over our squad net and fumbling to switch to the platoon channel before repeating himself. "You need to see this," was all he reported to the lieutenant, who promptly came jogging back down from the head of the advance. I'd had enough of the suspense at that point and walked toward Cook, turning back to see what he was looking at from his perspective. Holy fucking shitballs, was that an arm? It was. It was an arm, complete with a chunk of shoulder and a uniform sleeve and what looked like black material. Dropping down on my knees and slinging my rifle behind my back, I reached in and grabbed the material with finger and thumb to drag it out from under the dump truck, dropping it on the dirt near Havelock's feet. The lieutenant looked like he was going to cry, or hurl, or both, but what he didn't do was anything useful. "Cover!" Havelock barked, if only to send the 3 squads of gawping Marines away to look outward. I moved to stand up, but something on the sleeve of the severed arm caught my attention. Drawing my plasma knife, but not activating the burn feature, I flipped it over with the point like it might still come to life and get me. "Hey, would you really want to touch a severed arm even with gloves on?" "No, didn't think so. Shut up." "Holy shit," I said when the thing that caught my attention revealed itself. The material wasn't black. It was dark red, soaked in old blood. The patch on the sleeve revealed Cyrillic letters that I couldn't read, but the all-world emblem of a parachute was impossible to miss. "Staff Sergeant, looks like we have NRC paratroopers in the AO, I said. "Not all of them," Havelock answered, peering closer at the severed limb as if it could provide answers. The lieutenant finally reacted and started doing something, walking a short distance away and speaking rapidly into his radio before coming back to give his orders. "Advance to the quarry and secure the objective." Chapter 3. Lieutenant Colonel John J. DeSoto, CSMC. CSS Forthright Ground Combat Information Center. "Sir, all orbital pods safely on the ground. Troops are deploying," the naval lieutenant reported. DeSoto, running the GCIC on board the carrier CSS Forthright, acknowledged her report with a nod and watched the screens, waiting for video to come online while his brain multitasked. "Any sign of that NRC ship yet?" "Sir, no, sir." A naval rating refreshing the Ground Combat Information Center's sensor feed answered. DeSoto frowned, not at the thought of conflict, but at the idea that he didn't know if there was even a danger to counter. DeSoto hated being a lieutenant colonel. He'd hated being a major before that, but the combined States Marine Corps made it clear to him that he couldn't remain a captain forever, and that he had to choose between promotion or leaving the Corps. "Marines don't belong behind desks, sir," was what he'd told the Major General who summoned him to give that ultimatum. The fact that the General himself was behind a desk made his words risky, but the old man had assured him he understood the predicament even if he was making the man choose there and then if he was going up or going out. Promotion was the lesser of those two evils, but DeSoto longed for the days when he was back in the thick of it as a captain. He could still run things, still take responsibility for the lives of his men while he risked his own alongside them, but sitting up in orbit and acting as the coach on the sidelines instead of being the quarterback on the field of play made his blood boil. "What do we know about it?" he asked, not sure which officer or rating in the GCIC would give that information, but trusting them to recognize if the question was directed at them. "Voyne-class cruiser, sir. The Atlant. Well armed and a heck of a lot faster than our carrier," a Marine lieutenant wearing the insignia of the intelligence activity on his uniform reported, adding an unnecessary accent to the Russian words. DeSoto patiently explained that he knew very well that a light cruiser had the edge on them in terms of speed and maneuverability, and that wasn't the question he'd asked. He wanted to know what that particular ship had been doing before they had responded to the colony distress call. "Sir, intel indicates they were a deep system patrol boat with half a battalion of paratroopers assigned to her," another officer said. "Last sighting has them passing a jump lane junction near Midway Station's territory in late March." DeSoto ran the basic numbers in his head, figuring that the last time anyone in the Allied nations had seen the Confederate ship had been over half a year before. "Safe to assume they were working out of Ascension?" he asked, meaning the British outpost almost a week's jump from Midway and 11 days from their current location. Nobody answered, mostly because his reputation surrounding guesswork was less than kind. "Come on, people, no wrong answers here. Let's formulate a hypothesis," he said to spur them on. "Safe assumption, sir," a female lieutenant answered. "Although there aren't any active conflicts or territory challenges in the courts in this sector, so their deep system patrol would be taking them pretty darn close to combined states space." DeSoto swallowed to cover the response he wanted to blurt out. Of course he knew that none of the planets in the handful of systems the nearest jump lane covered was currently having its ownership contested in the Earth courts, but biting off the head of someone he'd just invited to speak wouldn't do his reputation any favors, nor would it increase the efficiency of his command. He hated the fact that, because of his senior rank, everyone under his relatively new command assumed he was unaware of how things were on the ground. He wasn't concerned about the Russian cruiser taking a shot at them because he knew the carrier had 2 wings of ready fighters in their launch tubes waiting to support the cap already looping their massive ship for such an occurrence. If the NRC opened fire, they'd barely live long enough to reach the conclusion that it was a bad idea. He didn't control those fighters, however. The ship's CIC under naval control managed that, leaving him to control the ground operation and request additional support from the captain of the ship should he need it. He thought of those pilots of the combat air patrol out in the dark and cold, running slow laps through empty space in case shit went down. He had no sympathy for them, and as with any career grunt, he held a deep-seated dislike of the Zoomies, mostly born of jealousy for their fancy chow and comfortable beds, and how they attracted female attention in a disproportionate ratio, even if they had a face like the shaved ass of a French pug. The fact that they were naval aviators and not Air Force made zero difference to him because a Zoomie was a Zoomie to a grunt, no matter what color their uniform. The only thing he could think of was that the NRC ship had put itself in orbit around the Sun or any of the 5 other planets or moons nearby to shield their signature. Only he wouldn't do that if he was them, because it would put him too far away to respond to his troops should they need orbital assistance. "Keep scanning all active sensors," he ordered the GCIC, "and recommend the bridge send out a welcome hail in English and Russian, just in case they feel like talking." He paced back toward the command chair and sat, waiting for the troops to deploy on the surface so many miles below them. Hurry up and wait, just like if he was on the ground with his boys and girls. Only this time, he was hurrying up and waiting in a safe, air-conditioned combat information suite with coffee being brought to him every time he emptied his battered tin mug. Sir, Captain Prescott on the horn now, wishing to speak to you directly, the ensign on comms reported. DeSoto nodded and lifted the handset locked into the arm of his chair for the call to be connected. DeSoto, he growled as a greeting. All eyes in the GCIC watched him unless they were glued to the tasks that required constant monitoring. His facial muscles didn't move as he acknowledged the report implacably. Understood, Captain. Get me live feed and secure your AO, then report back. Out. Returning the handset to the cradle, he stood and drained the last dregs of cold coffee from the mug, then walked along the bank of monitors until one showed what he expected to see. Confirmed, sir, the Marine intelligence officer said confidently. That's the emblem of the 12th Guards Airborne Brigade. What was their last posting? DeSoto asked, but the officer was already working on it. Last intelligence shows they were deployed 9 months ago on board various ships to patrol this sector past Ascension. DeSoto growled again, not sure what revelations identifying the unit that had arrived ahead of them could have brought. Signal the bridge. Request a formal report be sent back to Midway for sanitation and dissemination to the NRC forces at Ascension. Tell them we've arrived at the colony and have found no sign of the ship that responded to the distress call. Sir? An ensign manning the monitoring stations said hesitantly. His finger was raised to point at the displays as half of them began to show scrolling static before blinking out. Ours? DeSoto asked, questioning if it was the Marines who had activated their own EW countermeasures or if the troops were actively being blocked by an outside force. Not sure, sir. Calm. Signal the ground teams and request a report on electronic interference, DeSoto ordered, but the communications officer was already on it. They believe neodymium deposits in the quarry are interfering with signals, sir, he reported. Ground teams report no active jammers. Is the BFT still active? DeSoto asked, prompting an officer to bring up a satellite image display with clusters of blue dots all over it. Blue Force tracking system still operational, Colonel, she said. DeSoto relaxed, almost wishing the NRC paratroopers would take a swing at them so they could break the deadlock of the Cold War that had tied their hands for the last 5 years. War got in the way of expansion and profits, but Lieutenant Colonel DeSoto didn't give a crap about business or politics. When the businesses couldn't handle things with their little mercenary armies and the politicians couldn't bribe, threaten, or otherwise convince someone to do what they wanted, that was where he and his Marines came in. Sir, sensors detecting some minor seismic activity at the target site. DeSoto turned to the speaker and had covered half the distance to his terminal when the comms officer's voice erupted behind him. Sir, jump lane buoys reporting 4 NRC ships entering the sector. He almost gave orders, almost forgot that the captain of the ship was in another room like that one, ready to deal with all of the things he was suddenly panicking over. He lifted the handset beside his command chair to listen to the bridge where the captain gave the orders he wanted to hear. Request CIC launch ready birds and order all other fighters to stand by. Cap to push out and blockade their approach to prevent them from launching any troops to the surface. Com, get my... Colonel? The ensign monitoring the screens cried out. DeSoto turned back to see through the static, not believing for a second what he saw. Chapter 4. Barton. I found a few weird things on deployment. Mostly it was drugs, cash, or more often than you'd think, a boatload of sex toys. Pun very much intended. But a severed arm was right up there at the top of my list. Moving into the bowl where the quarry sides began to slope down, the squad net glitched and sent a god-awful noise through my brain. I flinched, turning the volume down so it didn't do that shit again, as did everyone else. EW check, Havelock ordered angrily. I dropped to one knee and unstrapped my pack, dragging out the countermeasure bundle to show him that it was switched off. EW countermeasures were great, but they blinded us as much as they blinded the enemy. And almost every time we'd suffered the kind of glitch we just had, it was because some dumb grunt hadn't secured his shit properly and the switch got flipped inside someone's ruck. Mistakes like that had a nasty habit of earning prizes for the entire platoon. Unable to find the culprit among us, Havelock stomped up and down to double-check none of us had fucked up the simple operation of a switch. "It's probably the mineral deposits inside the quarry, Staff Sergeant," the lieutenant explained within my earshot. "They're playing havoc with the electromagnetic pulses in this area. We'll have to do this the old-fashioned way." "You heard the lieutenant?" Havelock barked at the platoon. "Eyes and ears open, unless you need me to staple them to your skulls." I looked at the digital readout on my rifle. I saw the charge was still active, so I knew there couldn't have been any kind of EMP. I was grateful for that because if some big Russian paratrooper had already gotten his arm ripped off, I didn't much feel like being down here with just a knife and my charming personality. "Move out!" The order came down from the front. I moved, weapon up and senses frosty, until my boots sank into the soft grit that filled the quarry floor. Mine shafts led off in 4 directions, no doubt following the natural lines of the deposits after the surface amount had been mined, and something about the lack of light inside them made me feel about 10 years old and afraid of the dark. 4 mine shafts, 3 squads. "Barton, take your squad and clear that shaft. Go!" Havelock pointed his bladed hand straight at the furthest mine shaft and moved on to corral his own people to take the nearest tunnel. I led the way over the soft surface, my boots digging in like I was on vacation and dressed all wrong for the beach, before the entrance to the underground tunnel loomed ahead of us. "IR on sights," I ordered, in case any of my Marines felt like they could see in the dark. I flicked the selector on my weapon's integrated targeting sights to infrared mode and saw nothing inside the mine shaft. Nothing was good. But it was also bad because my mind told me whatever was going to go down would happen deeper inside and further away from the dull yellow glow of sunlight. The ground rumbled after we'd gone maybe 30 paces inside, making me freeze and want to run back for the safety outside in case we got crushed by a cave-in. "Corporal?" Cook's voice drifted to me, reminding me that he was barely out of school. "Eye to your scope, kid. Move up." We made it another 30 paces before the ground shook again, and I decided that was close enough. 1 shake was a scare, 2 shakes was a damn warning from the universe for my ass not to be underground. "Move, move," I snapped, sending my squad back to the surface. The sound of screams came faintly to me, at least I thought they were screams, and I took a knee to listen. Hearing nothing, I risked the squad radio, but only got the painful static that made me switch it off in the first place. Just when I was about to get up and run over to the tunnel where Havelock's squad had gone, I heard the screams again, this time answered by a long burst of automatic fire as if someone was banging 2 steel hammers onto an anvil like a damn drum roll. Marines erupted out of the tunnels and ran, some of them stopping to give covering fire but abandoning the action as there were too many of their own people in the way. "Out of the quarry!" the lieutenant screamed, his young voice lacking the bass of Havelock's, but his words still hitting home. "Get to high ground! Move, move, move!" I ran, stopping only long enough to drag Cook to his feet after he tripped and launched him ahead of me. My intention was to stay on his heels to make sure he made it out, but that little fucker had maybe 6 or 7 years on me, so he ran faster than he would if his high school girlfriend had just sent him a picture of a pack of condoms with the caption that her parents were out. I sprinted to keep up as gunfire hammered away behind me. It was answered by more gunfire, this time not sounding like the heavy hammering of our Mark 6s banging out tungsten rounds, but the sharper, more rapid thunder of a different weapon. I ran, listening to the odd conversation the 2 weapons exchanged until more lethal voices joined in to make it a full-blown argument. Reaching the higher ground out of the bowl of the quarry, I took a knee behind a boulder the size of 3 Marines and readied my weapon. "Bale, DMR up," I yelled, wanting him to provide better covering fire with the marksman rifle. He was already there, lying flat on top of a big rock to my right and banging rounds down range. "Russians!" Cook said, his voice shrill and his breathing rapid. "It's the Russians!" I didn't care. I didn't care if it was the Russians or the British or the Chinese or a mercenary group. Someone was shooting at Marines and that meant they had to fucking die. I lined up a dark figure coming out of the nearest tunnel and aimed over the heads of the last of the Marines still running for the higher ground. It shambled. It didn't run, or even walk, but moved like it was having a fit, and the movements just happened to make it walk by accident. In its right hand was a rifle, and occasionally it lifted the gun to spray bullets in the direction of the last of our guys to offer a running rear guard. I saw 2 of them go down just as I saw 3 rounds hit the shooter, but unlike the Marines, this guy didn't go down. A puff of pink mist exploded out the left side of his head, and he staggered, but still didn't drop. Beside and above me, I heard Brown mutter a curse after scoring a headshot with no effect on target. "What the hell are those things?" Cook asked, slapping his second magazine into his rifle. I said nothing. It didn't matter what they were, only that they were attacking us. I sighted down my rifle and started pumping double taps into it, just as everyone else did the same, and the thing jerked like it was dancing before it dropped to the dirt. The shooting didn't stop. In fact, it intensified, and I took my eye away from the scope to see that all the tunnels were spewing out these jerking, shambling people who moved at different speeds, but all in the same direction. Our direction. The 2 hit Marines were already being dragged backward, both of them still firing as their asses skidded over the dirt until they reached our position. Havelock was nowhere to be seen or heard, which was new, but I didn't need to shout orders as our whole squad was lined up behind cover on the ridge to pour fire into the things. I heard the electronic vroom sound of a grenade leaving an underbarrel launcher, and a second later the spray of dirt and flung body parts fountained out of the impact site. Ragged cheers and shouts went up, all variations on how much we loved killing, but the morale boost was a great feeling. Everyone who had the grenades was sending them down range now, spewing out clods of shattered limbs and dirt as the attackers condensed to filter up the slope where the road left the quarry. "Concentrate fire," I yelled, not sure if it was the right thing to do or even if anyone heard me as I began thumping bursts into the front ranks. Dropping out a spent mag, I slapped in a fresh one and emptied all 40 rounds in 20 seconds, but I already knew the plan wasn't going to work. These things, these people dressed in a mixture of NRC uniform, civilian clothing, and miners' coveralls, still came at us unless they were blown apart or had their heads taken off. A few heavies would cut them down, but because we'd been dropped to do recon, nobody had wanted to hump the massive crew-served guns, their tripods, or the 300 pounds of linked ammo for it. I lined up on a mercenary. At least, I guessed he was a merc, based on the way he was still dressed for a tactical, fancy-dress party, and carried a Mod 18 with some dumb, useless attachments nobody ever actually needed, which he waved in our direction. I squeezed off 3 bursts, most of which took him high in the chest and neck, and put him down. I moved my sight to the next closest asshole and let rip again, and again and again until my magazine was spent and I had to reload. With my eye away from the scope, I could see the bigger picture and knew we weren't going to stop them before they swarmed over us. The lieutenant, either through the same realization or through fear, was already yelling at us to withdraw. "Fall back!" he shrieked, tugging at armored shoulders and slapping his gloved hand on top of helmets. "Fall back!" He froze, his head snapping back like he'd gotten whiplash, before he fell like a tree to slam face down into the dust. As if dying was the most effective way to make his orders heard, Marines started to break off and run back down the road. They didn't panic and run away. They conducted a fighting withdrawal that made me feel hopeful we'd see the day out. I was one of the last to break cover, pausing only long enough to reach inside the lieutenant's chest plate and snap off his tag before I grabbed his 3 remaining spare magazines and followed the surviving Marines of our platoon. Catching up to those guys at the spot where the dump truck had hidden the severed arm, I called a halt and ordered observation of the road. Pulling my radio out of the pouch, I slid the dial to the platoon net and pressed the button. Blue 3 to Romeo, over. I repeated it twice, but got nothing back. "Squad net's still screwed up. I doubt it's transmitting," Cook said, sounding pretty cool for being in his first firefight. "You," I snapped, singling out a pair of Marines furthest away from where the fight was about to be. Run back to the town and report contact. Tell them Blue and Red 1 and 2 are down. I checked around me again to make sure I was right, and that I wasn't giving orders when there was still a sergeant there to rip me a new one. Tell them we need heavy support and medevac. Marines are down in the quarry and we need exfil. Go! I watched them go, running fast before a burst of fire chased them down the dusty track and threw them both into the ground. I was shocked, stunned into inaction for a second, knowing that I'd just killed them by giving orders I had no authority to give in the first damn place. A bullet hit the plate on my left shoulder and spun me around to force my head back into the fight. "Muscle up, buttercups," a Marine shouted as he readied his weapon to fire. I looked back down the road toward the quarry and saw the horizon fill with a dirty smear of shambling attackers behind the first wave heading right for us. Rifles spat bullets in both directions, and after spending way too long complaining of a bad back when the Corps made me hump 280 rifle rounds with me everywhere I went, I wished for the first time I had more. Running out of ammo was not a pleasant feeling, I thought, as I tried to conserve what I had left and take more careful single shots at heads. I nearly called the retreat then, but I hoped I could hold them off long enough for the other platoons to come and triple our numbers so we could win. "Last mag!" Cook yelled beside me. I glanced down, seeing that I'd be out too if I hadn't relieved the lieutenant of everything I could grab in a hurry. Pulling one out, I handed it to him wordlessly. He reloaded and carried on hammering away before the world turned upside down and inside out all at once. Then, like someone turned off the sound and the gravity, I was flung through the air to land in a mess on the road. All around me, the shitty colony planet flashed red and white, and the sound of battle was replaced by a high-pitched scream louder than anything I'd ever heard in my life. "Get up! Get up!" a voice screamed at me, but I couldn't hear it. Not really. I didn't even know if it was real. Bullets hit my armor, denting it in and leaving me with no idea if I'd been shot through. My right hand fluttered to find my rifle, but I couldn't feel it on my sling. It was torn, gone, and I was heading straight for destination fucked. Chapter 5. CSS Forthright, carrier in orbit of colony planet BG-192. The medics, on standby to board their light, fast transports, hustled and whooped as they ran to deploy. It didn't reflect a blasé attitude. It was just how they hyped themselves up for the danger they were about to run straight into. The corridor between their ready lounge and the hangar bay was short, and the only rooms off that corridor were the head and a storage locker that had been commandeered by 3 members of an Odin team, operators of the Special Operations Group, who were hitching a ride back to Midway from some mission out on another back-ass rock. The operators, Mike Anders and Mike McMillan, both staff sergeants in the Combined States Marine Corps, and both former Special Reconnaissance, were deployed by the SOG wherever they were needed. They were Odin, and the only thing more impressive than their abilities were the wild stories and rumors about what the operators who wore the crossed axes did. On the most recent occasion, it had been to conduct intelligence reconnaissance with an optional direct action package on a mining world where there was far too much talk of unionizing. On the whole, the government didn't involve itself in matters such as that, but when the government was the primary shareholder of that particular venture and relied on that world for a vast majority of the tungsten and agriculture it required, it was forced to take a more active interest. Unionization was fine. But when Intel uncovered the move was financed and backed by the NRC, it changed the game. With the target intel secured and the threat confirmed, they had executed the mark and left the planet on a small trading vessel shuttle, which on the outside looked like a beat-up old piece of shit. Under the hood, that old trader was modern and clean, as was the 3rd member of their team, Captain Haley Edwards. The pilot was seconded to the SOG support group from the Combined States Air Force, and although she wasn't an operator herself, she was as much part of the team as the others. Their ride home to Midway Station became extended when the carrier they'd linked up with was diverted to investigate an SOS call. "What the hell was that about?" McMillan asked Edwards. "Probably a new hair gel just arrived," Anders answered, being predictably unkind even if it wasn't accurate. The fast response medical extraction teams, universally known as the Helimedics or Helimeds, were an oddly brave breed of soldier who did their best to get into the thickest of any action going, only to perform field surgery in the open like they didn't acknowledge incoming enemy bullets or recognize their legitimacy. A disproportionate number of SOG recruits came through that route, and neither of the recon Marines had seen many of their brothers display the kind of planet-sized balls that job demanded. "Hey, what's the deal?" Edwards asked, poking her head out of their cabin and flagging down one of the Helimed pilots. "Fastball up on the planet. Case vac under fire," he said without stopping. Anders looked at McMillan and both immediately stood to start throwing on their armor. Neither had anything other than personal weapons, but their modified Mark 30 Mod 1s with full auto capability and extended magazines were good for close quarter work, along with their signature weapons in the form of a bearded plasma axe each. They had rifles and a Mark 20 marksman system, but they were packed away for the journey with no time to retrieve them. Bundling out of the cabin half-dressed for battle, they jogged to the hangar bay and ran to the last bird readying to launch. "Room for two more?" Anders asked. The pilot looked him up and down, taking in the dark armor and the crossed axes of the SOG insignia before nodding. "Strap yourselves in, boys. This ain't gonna be a smooth ride." "That's how we like it," McMillan answered, dragging the extended strap over his torso beside Anders, while the two awkwardly connected each other's armor plates on the fly. "Stand by. Launch in 3, 2, 1. Both were thrown flat against the rear bulkhead as the hangar bay doors decompressed rapidly, and the combined forces of that decompression and the engines of the fast transport kicked in to induce a nauseating amount of G-force. The pilot burned hard to get away from the carrier before he turned the nose down into a spiral turn that would take them through the atmosphere with an eye on speed over comfort. Opposite the two operators, the pair of medics seemed unconcerned by the violence of the launch, and both SOG men were silently impressed by their courage. This was what they did. Just as the operators trained hard for whatever eventuality they would be faced with, the Helimeds trained for fast launches into hot zones where they performed life-saving medical procedures under fire. Anders waved for their attention, pointing to his radio and being given the correct channel number by raised fingers, because the roar of the engines and the buffeting of the outer atmosphere made speaking impossible. "What's the situation?" he asked when he'd keyed in the right digits and joined their channel. "Marines in contact on the surface. Went to check out an SOS call after the NRC got there first," the medic answered. "Contact with the NRC?" McMillan asked, earning a shrug from the medic. It didn't matter. Contact was contact, and enemies were enemies. If it turned out to be goat herders firing old powder munitions at them, the outcome would still be the same. They'd engage, extract the Marines, and secure the AO if possible until more infantry arrived. The ride through atmosphere was rough, bouncing them all around as the heat inside the fast bird intensified, until it suddenly dissipated to be replaced by the roar and buffeting of atmosphere. "Atmo breached. Proceeding to extraction coordinates," the pilot reported with as much concern as telling a waiter how he liked his steak. That was the odd thing about the Helimed guys. They were Combined States Army, aboard a naval ship, heading to extract a company of Marines. The fact that both operators were former CSMC was a coincidence, because their group was made up of men and women from all 5 branches of the Combined States military. The only official requirement for entry was fitness and aptitude, and although the ranks of the SOG were heavy with Marines and Army operators, there were plenty of SEALs, Air Force, and even some Coast Guard personnel. The majority of their support group was Air Force, naturally, as that department usually handled their transportation needs. 30 seconds out, the pilot said coolly. Anders pointed the barrel of his Mark 30 Mod 1 at the door and fitted the thorium micro-reactor to bring the lethal little package online, as McMillan did the same. Neither of the medics carried anything other than the standard-issue Mark 30 pistol, but their primary job wasn't to fight. "We're a guy short," one of them said into the radio. Volunteers to man the door gun so we can do our thing? Oh, I'm all over that shit, Anders said with an evil grin. He loved squad weapons, and the chance to let rip on a Mod 1 Heavy was not one he'd let slip by. Stand by for landing, the pilot announced. I'll push out to give you cover, McMillan told the medics just as the engines roared and the deck pushed up when the pilot flared the engines to arrest their steep dive. As the landing struts thumped into the dirt, the door slid up to let in the screams and gunfire of battle. Anders spun, rolling upright and laying hands on the big weapon to haul back on the charging lever and let rip. Pang, 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 pang. Pang, 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 pang. He threw tungsten into the attack over the heads of the medics who were already out and dragging a wounded Marine toward the bird. McMillan stitched 3 bursts from his modified SMG into heads and holstered the weapon to take the stumbling Marine off their hands. The medics handed him off and went straight back out to rescue anyone else still alive in the mess of bodies in the smoking crater where they'd been providing what looked like a rearguard action. You're gonna be fine, Corporal, McMillan soothed the Marine over the sound of the heavy gunfire. He didn't respond, so the operator pushed his helmeted head to one side and pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck. Finding a pulse and seeing the gentle rise and fall of his chest armor, he secured the strap over him by yanking it tight and returned to the battle outside. He came around a little, muttering something McMillan couldn't hear, so the operator slipped out the thorium reactor from the rifle to make it safe and pressed the weapon into his hands. Hold on to this. Don't let it go, you hear me, Marine? 3 more Marines, those not obviously dead, were dragged aboard and strapped down as the assault wavered. Secure! Dust off! A medic yelled into the radio as he was still jumping through the open hatch. Anders carried on firing, pumping tungsten slugs the size of a finger into the last of the attackers still coming for them. The Mod 1 Heavy stopped firing and the hatch came down as the medics went to work. Their helmets had scanners that detected life signs, not a full medical diagnostic because those machines were the size of a full-grown man, but enough to speed the triage process up and make administering emergency medical aid a faster process. While the real-world application of battlefield triage had evolved in the hundreds of years since it was first used in a war on Earth, the concept remained the same. Medics sorted their casualties into immediate, urgent, and non-urgent categories, which, to the untrained eye, might have seemed brutal. One Marine screamed, repeatedly filling and expelling the air in his lungs in roars of agony as he clutched at the shattered ruin of his right knee. As bad as that injury looked, it wasn't life-threatening, and one of the medics jammed a device into his neck to administer a sedative and pain relief mix to stop the screaming. Not urgent, he said, taking a quick look at the cauterized mess that would probably result in the guy getting a prosthetic lower leg from the thigh down. He's gone, he said, pointing at the next Marine and moving on without a second of emotion interfering with his job. Hey, the other medic said, bent over, kneeling on the deck. Anders checked him out, seeing the medic's khaki glove come away from the left side of his upper chest, covered in blood. The other medic abandoned the triage of the Marines and jumped to his side, almost tripping over the unconscious Marine that McMillan had strapped down. You're good, buddy. You're all good, he said as he unclipped the armor and pulled it away to reveal a nasty through-and-through close to his armpit. Patch on the bloody tear through his flesh, the medic moved with fast, practiced hands. Ribs broken, the wounded medic said, diagnosing himself and holding the dressing tight to his side, leaning back to elevate his legs and fight the risk of shock. Talk to me. We need to get you. I'll live. Tell me about the casualties, the wounded man insisted through clenched teeth. 1 major trauma lower limb, cauterized, the uninjured medic reported. Not urgent. 1 dead, 1 unconscious, stand by, the medic said, shouting the report to his buddy as if working their minds collectively. Hey, I'm Med Qual, Anders said after securing the heavy. Good, the injured medic gasped. Check his injuries. Before either could work the unconscious Marine down from head to toe, the other injured guy half sat up against the restraining strap and yelled in agony before he jerked like electricity was running through him. Get his armor off, the medic shouted, steadying himself as the pilot leveled out their bird. Anders and McMillan tore at the guy's straps and buckles, and the medic lifted his uniform to run a small, curved plasma knife down it to expose the muscled chest underneath. Vitals are haywire, the medic shouted. He's in VF, stand back! He tore open a Velcro pouch and removed a device the size of his palm to slap it onto the skin in the center of the guy's chest. Prongs shot out of it and dug into the Marine's flesh before a countdown beep warned them not to touch the patient. 3 times it shocked him with no effect, each shock getting stronger as his entire body convulsed until the device powered down to signify no chance of resuscitation. A tortured groan came from the guy with the shattered knee as he tried to stand on it, fighting against the restraining strap and the fact that his leg bent outwards. He only succeeding in flopping over the ruined leg at an unnatural angle. That wasn't the shocking thing, though. What really turned their stomachs was the fact that his mouth opened and he drooled a black, oily substance out over his chest armor. The 2 medics and the 2 operators stared at him, not wanting to believe what they were seeing, but the Marine clumsily drew his sidearm and took a groggy, lazy aim at the injured medic. "No!" the guy yelled, left hand out as if it could stop a bullet as his right still clutched the field dressing tightly to his wound. McMillan didn't hesitate. His left hand slapped the gun down to the deck as he launched his entire body weight through his right elbow to strike a glancing blow across the Marine's jaw. With a crack audible over the engines, he slumped, chin on his chest, as the black gore continued to trickle onto his chest plate. McMillan turned to face Anders, both operators wearing an expression that needed no subtitles to clearly convey their collective, "What the fuck?" "What's going on back there?" the pilot asked. "Not sure," the shocked medic, not sporting a bullet hole, said. "We have 1 priority, 1 non-urgent, and 1... I don't know what the fuck to call that. Get us upstairs for emergency treatment." "Can you drop us off first?" McMillan asked, concerned that there were still Marines in contact dirtside. "No need. GCIC just ordered a full evac via Boomerang," the pilot answered. "Everyone's bugging out now. Whatever the hell happened down there, it's over. For us, at least." Chapter 6. CSS Carrier Forthright, Bridge. "Attention all NRC vessels. This is Captain Brannon of the CSS Forthright. Stand down all weapons and respond to hails immediately," Brannon said with a finger pointed at the comm officer who knew what he wanted without him requesting it. "Translate and repeat that until we get a response." "Attention CSS Forthright," came the accented response over the comm. "I am Commander Drozdov, in control of the NRC cruiser Atlant. You are to stand down and remove yourself from orbit. This planet has been designated hostile by NRC command. I say again, remove yourself from orbit and do not interfere with our efforts to recover our forces." "Commander, our people are currently engaged with a hostile force on the surface of the planet. Might I remind you that this sector is not contested territory, and our 2 nations are at a ceasefire here. This is combined states space, Commander, and you are encroaching. I urge you to stand down weapons and maintain safe distance until we can discuss the matter in full," Brannon said sternly. When no response came, he held a finger vertically over his lips at the comm officer, who responded with a thumbs up to say the connection was muted. "Sir, I'm reading 1 cruiser and 2 light frigates, attempting to identify from signal emissions." "There were 4 contacts from the jump lane, but that's only 3 vessels, Lieutenant," the captain patiently informed his signals intelligence officer. "Sir, the 4th contact, it's not there. It left the lane, but..." "Scan for gravitational distortions at their arrival coordinates," Brannon ordered, suspecting he knew why there was no 4th ship, but wanting to be sure before he started to panic internally. "Scanning," the lieutenant answered, head bent close to his terminal. "Take your time, son," Brannon said kindly, fighting the rising terror inside. "Sir, gravitational distortion detected." "All hands, set condition 1. Brennan said, still calm, but with a finger pointed at the comm officer again. People, we have a stealth sub in the system. Open that channel to the NRC again.
Oh, that's true that I can speak. I forgot about that. How you doing? Oh, here and there. I quit doing video because I was having problem with my software. They updated, and the updating was not working anymore, so I finally revert to another earlier version of the software. And since it's working fine, now I decide to go back to doing some video. I thought you were thinking about me all the time. My God, I'm really shocked. I thought I was one of your main concern in life, because you got nothing else to do. Can I possibly be wrong? My God. Yeah, I do find that very shocking that I could be wrong. Oh, cool. Please let me know when you get one or two done. I will be glad to buy some from you, if you let me. I actually bought some wood for it. I bought some walnut for that stuff, but I never did get around to actually do it. I did not know I was supposed to make two other stippling tools for you. I bought some very neat square walnut blank, and you can make 4 handles from each of them, and they are longitudinal, what do you call that, grain, so they are perfect for that. Yeah, I made one to show you the way it was. I thought you got far more equipment than I do for you to make that type of thing. I have to do everything by hand, and the thing I got is I do the thing with a drill press, which is not all that convenient, and you got a lathe, so with a lathe it's so much easier. No, 10 is cool. Ask a guy to make 5 extra like that. I can have 5. Just asking how much you want for it. Oh, you saw the lathe. I'm sorry, I did not know. If I got the time, I will try to make some more stippling tool. Yeah, but you know, having a lathe, it's so convenient. I wish I had one like that. I could make plenty of the stuff I need, but without proper equipment, it takes so long that it's really not convenient. Even to drill a hole on something round is kind of not convenient when you do it with a drill press. But I don't have the room to have one anyway. Oh, you need a head, my God. You know, I did make one with a bolt of some sort, but it's not adequate to make something heavier. I did not find. Hold on. Sorry, I did not get. I did not find. I was looking for a screwdriver. I was saying I did do that from a bolt, and I did not find a bolt which was big enough to make a bigger hammerhead. The one I made is very light, it's very convenient to do shading, but it's not good for doing the main cutting. Maybe I need to order it online. But I was very happy with the one I made, because it's working very well for that stuff. You cannot hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Anyway, if I find a bolt, a bigger bolt, I will try to make another one, another hammerhead. Oh, that's just, I need to sharpen it. It's not quite sharp enough. You know, when it's not sharp enough, it kind of slide on, even on gold. And then it make a bright cut. And I don't want a bright cut. I want a dark dot. I cannot show you. Oh, it's spinning. I bought a mini, whatever it's called. It's like a little drill, which is turning very fast. I think it's turning like 10,000 RPM, something like that. And I use it for sharpening my tool. You know, I got diamond stone. So that's what I use it with. Hold on, I need to do that for a minute. You know, if you call me on Messenger, I can show you. Yeah, it is a blower. My God, you can recognize things with their sound. They are really good. It's a little like a Dremel, just smaller. And oh, I kind of like it. It stays bulky, and it fit my tool. You know, I use 332nd, and it fit it well. Oh, where did I put that tool now? Lost my handle. Yes, I do, but sometimes I like, actually more and more I use a very light one for some reason. You just have to do a little more of it. And it gives a very different texture, which I do like. But yes, usually I use, oh, it's not the right one. I use something heavier to do something darker. But heavier lights, they need to be very sharp. If they are not very sharp, they give bright cut or bright dot. And I don't like it. I want the stuff to do light dot. And I can find the thing, of course, and I cannot find it. I made a new Lazy Susan, and I made that out of a very thick piece of metal and some bearing, and it worked very well. I was very pleased with myself. And I put that on steel plate, a steel plate so it doesn't bend. And it worked very well for me. See, when you do the stippling, if you don't want to slide, you need to have as much as possible a perpendicular axe to the surface you are working on. That space is going to be pretty dark, so I can use something a little heavier. Look! It looks like that. It's not done, of course. I think it's going to be cool. Yeah, what I need to do, I need to, see, I did put some hair here and there. Okay, let me show you. I did do that here, and it worked actually fairly well when you look at it with your bare eyes. It looked okay. I did the same thing with the tail. See there? And I need to do the same thing here. There is a very light, almost white part of the behind. And I need to do some hair there, but I want to do that dark spot there before, for some reason. So I'm going to do that dark spot. And then I will do my other leg. Yeah, tomorrow I will go to the hardware store to look for a bolt and see what they have. But since I do the hammerhead by hand, it takes me forever. And I need a very big bolt to start with. But look, that's a little hammer I made. No, you don't see it. It's too big. All that stuff is gold. It's amazing actually when you think about it. That's my tool is carbide. And I am doing it on gold, which is very soft. But it breaks it anyway. I try to do something quite dark here on that line. That's, I don't know that, that's the top of the leg of my Coyote. And then I'm going to I don't know what I was using. I use the biggest bolt I could find on a hardware store I went. But I was not looking very hard. I will try to go there tomorrow to see if they got something a little bigger. And if they don't, I will ask what I'm buying, and I will go online and buy something bigger. Because it's really, really too light. You know, after I remove so much metal, it's really too light to make a decent hammer for cutting. See, the light tool that I'm using right now, I give a very different texture because you need to have really a lot of dot to do something dark. And it's not at all the same texture as what you got when you have a much heavier tool. See, especially when you do the face, it's a very thin hair actually on the face of the dog. So you need, I can do some hair now. Actually, I'm not doing hair, I'm doing, I don't know how you would call that. It's a bunch of hair which are getting together. But I mean they are not individual hair. Yeah, it's very difficult to do interstate or type of thing like that. People change their mind or people don't realize how much this stuff is costing. And shipping is so expensive. I have to ship a new computer to my mom, and the shipping is almost as much as the laptop I'm sending her. I don't understand how Chinese can send stuff for so little money. And we have to pay tremendous amount of money for the same service. Actually, not even the same service, because actually when they ship it to me, it does arrive. And quite often when I ship stuff, not only do I pay much more money, but often it doesn't even make it. Yeah, shipping is not my main thing. I think that there is always a good reason why it's delayed or slow or did not arrive. You know what drives me nuts? That even when you insure stuff and it does not arrive? No, it's actually a cute little gun. It's a Dakota single shot. I really like this gun. Always wanted to engrave one. And so I got to engrave one. I mean, they are really cute, but they are ridiculously expensive. I was looking at their retail price for that stuff. I knew they want 12,000. There. I mean, with the basic stock and basic bluing. A Dakota single shot. It looked like the Ruger #1, but much smaller. It's really a very nice little rifle, and cosmetically. No, they are not very popular. No, it's a rifle. I think it's, I don't know, I suppose they got different caliber. And I suppose that one must be a fairly small caliber. If they want me to engrave a Coyote, I suppose that it may be a 7 mm or something like that. Go online and look at it, you'll see it's a beautiful little rifle. Dakota is like the state. Dakota. It might be Dakota Arm, but I think if you type Dakota Firearm, you will find it. Spoke to them once. Yes, Dakota. Are you trying to say that my accent is so bad that you cannot understand it? If you say that, I won't believe you, of course. Or if you try to imply it, I won't believe it. What have you been working on? No, it's not a metal pen. I mean, you can call it a metal pen if you want. I just put the tool carbide blank on the top of it. Sorry, not on the top, at the bottom of it, to do the stippling. Sorry, Bakshashi, I didn't mean to ignore you. Oh, how is Raymond doing? Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe he was depressed. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Yeah, I spoke to Pigeon yesterday. He was online. He seemed to be doing well. He told me that he was working on a Browning actually. Yard work. See, that's why I would never want to have a house. Of course, I don't have any inclination to do yard work or any work actually. I think it's good if you like that type of thing. It's good for other people, let's say. I'll try to use the other one. Hello Dean, how are you doing? Excuse me.
He waited as the comm officer finished declaring the alert condition over the ship-wide channel and hit the icons on the display to open the link again. Commander Drozdov, this is Captain Brannon. I say again, I need all 4 of your vessels to stand down and power down weapons. When you do that, I will withdraw my fighters and we can discuss what's occurring on the surface. I assure you, Commander, we have no intention of starting anything here, but we will defend ourselves if your vessels threaten us. Over. A long pause followed, during which Brannon held up a hand to prevent any of his bridge crew from speaking. He'd said what he needed to, and to add to that would only make him appear weak or desperate. 10 agonizing seconds ticked by until the Russian commander responded. Withdraw your fighters, and we will stand down our weapons systems. Brannon smiled, expecting some kind of compromise in which the hostile leader of the small battle group could save face. The cruiser and 2 light frigates would be annihilated by 3 flights of fighter craft and the carrier's heavy guns, but there would be heavy losses, and the presence of a stealth sub in their AO put one hell of a wrinkle in any potential proceedings. Withdrawing fighters now, Commander. I'll prepare a report on our surface activity and send it to you shortly. Forthright out. Sir, inbound medevac craft requesting priority docking, the comm officer announced. Granted. Mr. Evans, you have the con, he said to his second-in-command, walking off the bridge to head for the GCIC and get some explanations for what the hell was going on. John, tell me what I'm seeing, Brannon said quietly to his Marine colonel as the 2 senior officers reviewed clips of footage taken from the helmet software of recovered Marines. Sir, 2 squads deployed to the nearest mine north of the town and encountered resistance, DeSoto said. Resistance? They were attacked. Who attacked them? Brannon asked, his legendary patience nowhere near tested yet. A mixture of NRC combatants and colonists, only... To better explain, DeSoto showed a sketchy and distorted 5-second clip of an advancing horde of people, black gore staining their chests as they walked on stiff limbs straight into fire. Bullets tore through them, but only when their bodies were broken did their suicidal advance end. Some fired weapons, only without the professionalism of trained soldiers because they appeared drunk or drugged. Ever seen an NRC paratrooper fire their weapon like that? Brannon asked DeSoto. No, sir, I have not. He'd probably get a sharpened shovel thrown at his dome for that kind of poor discipline. Sirs, first Helimet birds are docking, an aide informed them. Both senior men straightened and headed aft to the medical bay where any survivors would be taken. Are all our forces off the surface? Brannon asked. They should be in the next few minutes, DeSoto assured him. And the bill? DeSoto frowned at the casual way the naval officer inquired about the number of casualties, but responded dutifully. Looks like we lost almost an entire platoon, sir. Damn it. I'm sorry, John. Not a good day out. The understatement carried them in silence until they reached the med bay, where their first impressions were not hopeful. 6 armored bodies lay on gurneys with their faces covered by white sheets, blood soaked through the fabric in various places. One Marine, his armor strewn about the deck as the medics worked on his near-naked body, jerked and twitched. Give me an IV line in and prep for brain scan, the doctor ordered. I'm concerned about the flash damage to his neck and face, so I need to see brain activity ASAP. Attention on deck, a Marine in uniform but no armor cried out, annoying both Brannon and DeSoto because the formality would slow down the life-saving work. As you were, both officers barked in unison, sending the few junior ranks scurrying back to their duties. The arrival of senior officers in any situation had a nasty habit of slowing down the real work, and neither captain nor lieutenant colonel thought themselves worthy of stopping the medics working by their mere presence. Brannon stepped to one bed where the patient was sitting up, protesting that he needed to assist. Son, you've been shot, Brannon said in a fatherly tone. Best you lie down and let these fine soldiers take care of you. That's what I've been trying to tell him, Captain. Another dust-stained medic answered as he prepped an injector to give to his teammate. How was it down there? DeSoto asked quietly. Did you see? The medic's face dropped and paled even further before he answered. Yes, Colonel. We saw all right. We saw it happen inside our damn bird, he said. We'd probably all be dead if it wasn't for the SOG guys. DeSoto straightened up, his brain pulling up the recent information in search of when he'd ordered special operations troops to be deployed. He knew he hadn't because, for one thing, he had no SOG under his command, and for another, he'd need Sector Command authority to deploy them on any mission not designated on their docket. What SOG guys? He asked. The medic, distracted by his job and not observing the formalities in a way that both men forgave unquestioningly, turned and jutted his chin at the two guys in dark armor loitering at the back of the med bay over a gurney. Both wore plastic surgical gowns and transparent face shields, which struck him as odd. DeSoto led the way to them, with Brandon following. On seeing them approach, the nearest soldier raised a flat hand in warning. Sir, recommend you stay back. Medics are in the process of quarantining this casualty. DeSoto's feet locked him to the deck so fast that Brandon almost rear-ended him. Quarantine? Explain, the Marine Colonel ordered. Sir, this Marine was injured, pretty badly, but it looks like he was infected with something on the surface, the other SOG operator said. DeSoto noticed the plastic ties keeping the Marine's wrists attached to the gurney and the way the operator's hand stayed on the grip of his weapon. If a Marine operating at the level he was accustomed to felt that twitchy, then the Colonel took it as a sign to keep back. The conversation was cut short by the arrival of a medical team in full protective gear who wheeled the unconscious Marine away to an isolation chamber. You two follow me, a medical officer ordered the two operators. You'll need to be fully decontaminated before you go anywhere. Sirs? She turned to the two senior officers wearing a distinctly unimpressed look. You shouldn't be in here. Taking the hint, they retreated, DeSoto calling out to the operators as he backpedaled. I'll have someone debrief you properly when you're done here, he said, earning nods of agreement from the men. Back out in the corridor, Brandon turned to DeSoto and asked the difficult question. How in the hell am I going to explain that to the Russians? With the truth, sir. No two ways about it. But I'd prefer to understand the situation a little better before we have that conversation, DeSoto told him. Me too. I need a remote recovery unit on the surface to find out what went down. Can you see to it? No can do, sir, DeSoto answered. I was already planning to deploy the bots, but the interference won't allow any wireless signals. I just wished I'd thought to do that the first time. Not your fault, Colonel, Brandon assured him. You ever see anything like that before? No, sir. No, I have not. Chapter 7. CSS Forthright. Captain Edwards hung around and listened to the comm traffic from the pilot's lounge where the Helimed teams hung out, feeling like, as the members of her Odin team would put it, a spare prick at an orgy did not sit well with her. There were pilots down there risking their lives to get their crews safely on the ground and recover injured Marines, making her jealous of their deployment, guilty that she wasn't sacrificing her own safety as others like her were doing, and pissed that she was left behind with nothing to do. When McMillan and Anders didn't come back with the first Helimed guys, she held her tongue, not wanting to break the veil of silence and secrecy that surrounded SOG and the dedicated support group attached to them. But the looks on the faces of the medics and the pilots turned her blood cold. What happened? She asked, leaving out the unasked question about her guys. A pilot, an army captain, dropped himself into a chair heavily and accepted a can of soda from a medic. Not a fucking clue, he answered her, popping the top and taking a long pull. Colonists were hiding in the mines and came out shooting. Yeah, but that wasn't right. And it wasn't just colonists either, the medic said as he paced the ready lounge, still wound up from the deployment. What does that mean? Edwards asked. It means the NRC were there too in the mines, but the way they moved... The pilot trailed off, shaking his head. And that shit coming out of their mouths, what the fuck was all that? the medic asked, not receiving an answer as the rest of the Helimed team filed in. Where's Lemmy and Burns? The medic asked the pilot. Lemmy took a round to the side. He's fine before you throw a fit, the other pilot said, taking a drink from the cooler and slumping down opposite Edwards. Burns is still with him, but they're both in quarantine with the SOG guys. Oh, thank fuck, thought Edwards. The SOG guys? They dropped with you? The other pilot asked. Yeah, good thing they did, too, the pilot said enthusiastically. The second we hit Dirtside, the fuckers tried to swarm my bird. We grabbed a few guys and dusted off, but one of them started spewing black stuff and tried to gun Lemmy down in the back. I shit you not. A chorus erupted in the room with a general consensus of, what the fuck? Yeah, her guy knocked him out like he'd swung a ball hammer and tied him up, the pilot said with a nod to Edwards. They're quarantining him until they know what the hell's going on, but I heard they're going to deploy remote units to start picking over the colony site. So you better get to essential maintenance on your birds if you don't want to get caught up in taxi duty. And my guys? Edwards asked, unable to keep silent any longer. They're what? Infected? The pilot shook his head as he stood and stripped off the upper body of his flight suit to tie the sleeves around his waist. No, at least it doesn't look like it. They're getting scrubbed down through decon, but they should be good. Edwards couldn't hide her relief at that. Not just because she felt happy in the company of the two quiet men who were like her weird older stepbrothers, but because she wouldn't be taking an empty bird back to SOG Sector Command at Midway to report a mission success, but a total loss of her team. Stripped naked, the two operators stood with their arms out and held their breath as the chemicals were sprayed over their bodies. Turning around, they felt the cold jets cover their backs as the automated arms of bots ran up and down them to ensure the cleansing solution hit every part of their bodies. When the robotic arm bearing the jet fired vertically upward between Anders's legs, he couldn't help but blurt out, "Whoa there, buy me a drink first," which made McMillan laugh and inhale the fumes coming off the solution. Both coughing, they emerged into another chamber where they air-dried and dressed in simple white scrubs to wait the hour deemed necessary by the medical team to be sure they didn't manifest symptoms. That hour, it seemed, was not to be spent relaxing. "Marines," a captain, dressed in fatigues and sporting intelligence emblems, said as he activated the speaker on the other side of the observation glass. "Identify yourselves for the record. Staff Sergeant Michael Anders. Staff Sergeant Michael McMillan. And your duty aboard this ship?" the Marine captain went on. "Just passengers, sir," Anders answered. "From where to where?" McMillan shot Anders a knowing look, but kept his mouth closed. "Heading for Midway, sir. Sorry, that's all we can tell you," Anders said, hoping the officer got the point and didn't ask anything else. "Marines, it's imperative that you understand the gravity of what happened here today. I need to know where you were coming from for my report." Anders sagged and groaned, disappointed that the young man didn't know when to flex and when to fold, as if the 2 bars on his chest somehow made him a big deal. "Captain," McMillan said patiently, "you cannot put our names in any report, just as we can't tell you where we were prior to hitching a ride." "Marine, I do this for a living," the captain said condescendingly. "I will redact your names from any official reports sent outside this ship, which mean, all due respect, Captain, you redact our names and that immediately raises red flags. Those reports inevitably end up on someone's desk who pulls rank and wants to know what the little black boxes mean, for no good reason other than to measure their own dick. And that leads back to us being here, which in turn leads to us being traced back to an incident that may or may not have occurred near this sector, and that points the finger straight at SOG for backlash from the potential fallout that may or may not be coming," McMillan explained, his rationale ending with a deep intake of breath to underline how exhaustive his explanation had been. "What he's saying, Captain, is that we're not here, we were never here, and nobody can prove we were here unless you write a report that won't get censored before it's too late. Hopefully. The captain of the ship wanted to cite you for medals, The officer tried, seeing if their vanity would divert their strict code of secrecy and give him the win. It backfired as both operators laughed. "Sorry, sir," Anders answered. "We don't get medals. We get medals, people ask what we got them for. Then there's a record, and we're right back to square one. Those Helamed guys, though, they deserve medals. Especially the guy who got shot. That's a purple head right there." Macmillan chimed in. "You mean a purple heart, Marine?" The captain corrected him sternly. "Whatever you say, sir," Anders answered with amusement. "You think being injured in the line of duty is funny, Staff Sergeant?" The captain snapped. "No, sir, I don't. Having been shot a few times myself, I can tell you from personal experience it is not funny," Anders answered, somehow implying that the captain wouldn't understand anything other than the theory. "It's just what we call a purple heart," Macmillan explained for his benefit. "You wear one of those on your chest out in the civilian world, and it's good for a little attention from the opposite sex, you know what I'm saying?" He added a gesture with his right hand and a twitch of his eyebrows to embarrass the captain into dropping the questions. Silence ensued, during which the intelligence officer looked like he was going to burst with frustration or cry. "Your report on what happened on the surface," he said finally, not phrasing a question, but if it was an order, it came out a little too weak to make either Marine answer. "Off the record, sir?" Anders asked hopefully. "We saw what happened, but we can't have that on record against our names." "Fine," the captain said, snapping the cover closed on his tablet. "Just tell me and I'll work it in elsewhere." The two recon Marines exchanged another glance, this time waiting to see which one was volunteering to put their memories into words and make them real. "Sir, we saw a mixed force of civilians, mercenary troops, and NRC paratroopers," Anders said. "They all appeared to be under some unknown influence that made them attack with no regard for their personal safety." "In what way?" "In the way that people in their right minds don't advance straight into gunfire, sir. Not even the Russians." The officer nodded uncomfortably and made a note before gesturing for him to continue. "And they all had some kind of substance coming out of their mouths, like oil," Anders said. "And the incident on board the medical evac transport? What happened for you to justify striking and restraining an injured Marine?" "Because that black shit started coming out of his mouth, and he was going to shoot one of the Helamed guys," Macmillan answered as patiently as he could. "I see. Anything else?" the captain asked. "No, sir," the two operators chorused. Barton. My eyes opened. Well, my left eye opened, but my right eye was covered with something so I couldn't see out of that side, which made me panic for a minute until my brain registered some kind of dressing up that side of my face. I tried to sit up, feeling like the carrier's gravity generator had cut out and the ship was going into either a nosedive or a steep climb, depending on which way was relative up. Either way, I didn't know what was up or down, and the urge to throw up or down was absolutely overwhelming. If I thought getting yelled at to wake up from jump sleep was bad, this was like jump sleep, all the hangovers I'd ever experienced, and a serious ass-kicking all rolled into one. "Easy now, soldier, relax," a female voice said as pressure gently exerted itself on the skin of my chest. The pressure came through warm, slender fingers and told me I was at least half naked. I lay back as I was told and tried to figure out where I was. Deployment, yeah, I remember that. The drop, the empty town. Holy fuck. "Where's my squad?" I half yelled, trying to sit up again. "You've suffered a serious injury, soldier. Quite a few, actually. So you need to lie down and relax." "Marine," I mumbled, the right side of my mouth not working properly. "What?" "I'm a Marine, a corporal." "My apologies, Corporal. My name is Dr. Laura Vey.
Like I said, you've been injured and you need to take time to adjust to...
Oh, Jesus, I yelled. For some reason, her words made me think I'd lost my legs and she was building up to the reveal. I sat up, feeling the same dizzying nausea, but gripping the sides of the bed and pulling until I could see my bare feet. I wiggled the toes on each foot in turn until I convinced myself they were actually mine, like someone else's fucking feet would be in my bed, and slumped back in pain. My left eye, when my vision swam back into focus, showed me a white coat with a fatigue uniform underneath. The rank flash on her chest belonged to a major, but she looked about my age and was small enough to be carried in my ruck. Major? I said, not meaning to, but unable to keep all of my thoughts inside my head.
I'm a doctor first, major second,
she said kindly, wearing the kind of smile I'd never seen on any sawbones before. It dawned on me then that she wasn't a medical doctor. You're a shrink?
I'm a forensic clinical psychologist with the CS Army, she said, her accent odd until I could place it.
Canadian?
You've been injured, but I'm told you should make a full physical recovery. I want to talk to you about what you saw and how it affected you.
Who the hell was this woman? I'm a Marine. We don't talk about how things make us feel. We wait for shore leave and get drunk, get into a fight, then we forget about it. What the fuck did she expect me to say? How bad? I muttered, the pain starting to wash over me again and bringing back the dizziness like it had gone for reinforcements. I gripped the sides of the bed so I didn't fall off.
Physically, I think the official diagnosis is that you're pretty badly banged up. You'll need some surgery and skin grafts. And I'm also told you've been subjected to some mild radiation, which...
Radiation? Doc, am I gonna grow an extra ball?
No, Corporal Barton. The radiation exposure, I'm assured, was mild. It apparently came from a thorium reactor explosion.
So that's what blew me up, I thought. Damn, I thought it was a grenade. My fingers automatically went up to the right side of my neck where I thought I'd been melting. My squad? I asked. It hit me like a missile when I remembered them. How did I get out? How many made it?
Corporal, I have to inform you that of the 3 squads in contact on the surface, only you survived.
Boom. There it was. The dick punch she hit me with was hard and right on the damn money. I wanted to throw up, wanted to cry, wanted to drop right back to the surface and pick up where I had left off. Hell, I wanted to have died down there with everyone because my mind was telling me that the sole survivor is usually the coward who'd run the furthest away from the enemy.
You were extracted by an Army helimed crew, she said. You're back aboard the Forthright, but we need to transfer you to Midway for surgery.
I didn't respond. The whole platoon was gone. Ramirez, the LT, Havelock, the kid. The Corps hadn't suffered losses like that since the territory wars with the NRC.
You need to rest now. The medical doctors will give you something to help with that,
she said before I sensed her step back and someone else move in. I sent 2 guys back. They were supposed to...
I'm sorry, Corporal. Other than you, nobody else from the quarry survived,
she said soothingly, like there was a nice way to give that kind of information. As soon as she'd started talking, I remembered seeing those 2 Marines thrown down by gunfire, and the guilt of sending them to their death started to crush my chest and made the machines behind my head beat faster. A cold sensation washed up my right arm, growing warmer until I passed out again. Chapter 8. CSS Forthright. Bridge.
Sir, Midway Sector commands on the horn requesting your immediate attention, the comm officer said.
Brennan stood, walking to the briefing room attached to the bridge with a nod to his senior commander to take over. Sitting down and signing in on the terminal with his handprint, he saw the scrolling icon of an incoming message decrypting. The screen blinked to life to show a female admiral in dress uniform.
Captain Brennan, she greeted him.
Admiral?
We've received your interim report, and I have to say this concerns me greatly. I'm sending additional ships to your location, but I need the Forthright to remain in situ and quarantine that planet.
Admiral, the position here is tenuous. The NRC have a small flotilla, and we strongly suspect the presence of a stealth sub.
It's a Normandy class, which we believe is the HMS Assassin. We're sending you a resource to counter that threat, but what I need from you is intel, Captain. I understand there were survivors from the mission? Survivors who had close contact with the anomalies?
The British supporting the NRC? That was an unwelcome thought, even if it wasn't exactly unexpected. Yes, Admiral. One Marine who'd been in contact made it off the surface. He's badly injured and requires surgery that my medical team aren't sure they can perform fully here. Brandon answered before pausing uncomfortably. As for the other Marine, I'm afraid he passed away not long after we'd isolated him.
Very well. I need that injured Marine back at Midway while you maintain the integrity of that planet. Nothing in or out, Captain. At all. I've diverted the CSS Buenos Aires to your location. By sheer luck, it's the closest vessel to you in this sector, and they will return your Marine to Midway along with the, other survivor and the special operations element you're transporting. Expect them in your AO within 5 hours, and the support group elements to begin arriving in 4 days, with the last coming from Midway to be with you in 8. I expect you're preparing to send a robotic unit to the surface to investigate, but I want you to hold off on that until reinforcements arrive and a decision is made about how we approach the problem.
Admiral, I'd be much happier if the Buenos Aires stayed with the Forthright to counter the NRC threat.
Negative, Captain. The retrieval of those 2 assets is our highest priority. Diplomatic channels will resolve the other issue.
Admiral, the NRC forces here are going to want to send their own reconnaissance team to the surface to investigate. Without taking direct action and starting a conflict, I'm not confident I can win without heavy losses. I'm afraid I just don't see how that's possible, Brannon said insistently, annoyed that he'd have to belay his orders to prepare a roving probe unit to the surface.
You let us worry about that, Captain. We're currently in negotiations with NRC Command at Ascension with an eye on a truce in that sector, so we can investigate the incident jointly, she said, her lips tightening into a straight line as she spoke to hold back her real thoughts on the matter.
Brannon kept his own expression neutral, knowing from experience that the NRC were happy enough to call a truce until they felt it was in their interests to do otherwise. Understood, Admiral. Forthright will maintain quarantine over the planet. Am I authorized to discuss this with the NRC commander in charge in the system?
Only what we've discussed, Captain. Our respective governments are working on a diplomatic solution to what appears to be a joint problem, and until such time as those details are ironed out, I need everyone to keep their fingers off their triggers.
Brannon understood, responding with a confirmation of his orders before the encrypted comlink was severed. Walking back out onto the bridge, Commander Evans stood from the captain's chair, but Brannon waved him back down. Orders are to quarantine the planet with nothing in or out. The combined states government is in negotiations with the NRC and, I suspect, with the United Kingdom of Britain. We are expecting reinforcements imminently, but make no mistake, people, we are on a hair trigger here and must not start a conflict unless we have no choice. Com? The lieutenant at the communications station acknowledged him. Signal Commander Drozdov and inform him that we are expecting a vessel in the AO to recover injured personnel. Assure him that it is not a tactical reinforcement. Carry on. He left the bridge, heading for the medical bay to give his orders personally because that was how he led his ship. A Marine officer stopped in the corridor and stood aside to let him pass, tablet clutched under one arm, and Brandon stopped to talk to him. Have you debriefed our special operations friends, Captain? He asked. Sir, yes, sir, I have. Are they medically cleared to leave the ship? Not sure, sir. That's a question for the doctors. The captain answered, clearly in some kind of mood. As you were, Brandon said, resuming his journey until he reached the medical bay and asked for an update on their survivor. He's not in great shape, sir. The doctor in charge of his care answered. He needs surgery that we could do here, but it would be safer to stabilize him and transport him back to Midway. Do that, Brandon ordered. I want him prepped and ready to go. What about the two? He hesitated, unsure what terminology to use to the doctor, but the man knew who he was referring to. They're in a quarantine cell, but neither show any abnormal signs. I'll be happy to clear them to leave with the patient, unless you prefer them to remain there. Brandon nodded, happy that the man understood where he was going with it, then shook his head to indicate he didn't want them kept locked up. Good. Tell them that the Buenos Aires is en route to recover them and the casualty, and pass on my thanks for their intervention. The doctor acknowledged the orders and excused himself, leaving Brannon standing in the emergency treatment bay where the blood was being washed away and the pieces of discarded armor were being collected. Shaking his head at the bloody nature of his day, he returned to the bridge to keep one eye on the clock and another on the NRC contacts that he could see. The presence of a British attack submarine out there in the inky black troubled him greatly, as it would any captain of a large ship. It was like swimming in murky water after someone had shouted, "Shark!" "Mic check, 1-2, Captain Edwards said as her passengers arrived back at the cabin assigned to them. "You good?" Both Marines smiled at her use of the catchphrase she'd coined for greeting them. "All good," Anders answered, pulling off the white shirt and digging in his locker for fatigues. McMillan dropped the 2 boxes beside a cot that he lay down on and pulled out a new pair of boots which he began lacing up. "I hate breaking in new boots," he complained. "Damn quarantine." "At least they didn't lock us down for a whole month," Anders responded as he dropped his pants and made Edwards suddenly find something interesting on the opposite wall. Slipping his feet into fresh skivvies, he dressed before sitting on the cot beside McMillan and retrieving his own pair of new replacement boots drawn from the carrier's stores, his last pair probably already undergoing incineration. Edwards' tablet chirped an incoming call, making her sit up and straighten her hair before she hit the icon to answer it. "Captain Edwards," she said, just in case the person who called her directly had made a mistake. "Edwards, Commander Evans on the bridge. You need to prep for disembark. CSS Buenos Aires is en route to withdraw your team and escort an injured Marine to Midway." "Understood, sir. What's the ETA?" 4 hours. Bridge out." "You hear that?" she asked, seeing both operators watching her. "Yeah? Any idea why?" Anders asked. "My guess is they want us out of here before it gets hot," McMillan answered. "Easier to get us out on a medevac than explaining to the Russians where a shuttle's going." "Yeah, makes sense," Anders said, dropping a boot on the deck and shoving his foot inside before lacing it up. McMillan finished lacing both of his boots before he stood and retrieved fresh clothing, sparing their younger pilot her blushes by stepping out of sight behind a locker to change his pants. Stepping back out into the center of the small cabin and pulling a shirt over his muscled body, he frowned in thought. Unless SOGCOM wants a debrief. Makes sense they'd be deploying at least a standby unit given what went down Dirtside. "My guess is the team guys at Midway will already be shipping out," Anders said. "Which means we need to get back there so we can get redeployed back here. Make it all official." "Grab your gear then," Edwards said. "I'll go prep the bird." The CSS Buenos Aires, its crew of 40, pulled from a routine patrol to respond to an emerging threat as fast as they could move, dropped out of the jump lane and immediately engaged silent running. Their hull was designed to be as invisible to the naked eye as it was to any ship's sensors, but it lacked the sleekness of the Russian or British stealth vessels as the design was much older. Where the combined states Navy had invested in heavy carriers and long-range battleships to bring to the forefront of human technology, other nations with smaller standing military forces had favored sneak attacks in opposition to the CS's official large and in-charge posture. Even if she was old and technologically inferior by a small margin, the Buenos Aires was fast and heavily armed with a dedicated crew led by efficient staff officers. It wasn't a great surprise to learn that their mission was to act as a fast, lethal taxicab, because that kind of mission was precisely what the British referred to as the bread and butter of stealth boat work. Infiltration and exfiltration of covert units, special operations teams, and remote comm intercept buoys was what they did best. But they could also take out ships 10 times their size by slowly creeping close enough to launch torpedoes and missiles at a range impossible to avoid. Breaking their silence, the ship hailed the carrier looming impossibly large ahead of them, in orbit of a dust bowl of a planet with little surface water. They went dark again and moved into position above the wide dorsal section that they still referred to as the flat top, harking back hundreds of years to when surface ships launched old sub-atmo planes from their decks by launching them like missiles. They didn't dock. Instead, they waited with their own small hangar bay door open as a tiny transport shuttle drifted up and away from the carrier at low speed because of their proximity to 2 larger ships. The hangar bay doors opened and the internal lights made it appear as if the rectangle of light just hung in space. The pilot of the little transport expertly, casually even, rotated the vessel by thrusters to keep the nose where it was and swung the rear of the craft around before it slid horizontally to fit inside the bay perfectly. The Buenos Aires was not a large vessel by any means and was utterly dwarfed by the imposing carrier Forthright, so the hangar bays weren't large enough to carry anything bigger than a fast transport, which made it a tight fit for the apparently civilian trader sliding aboard. Magnetic clamps engaged, and the outer door slid shut to close off that odd rectangle of light before the interior pressurized to give the occupants a green light. "We're good," Edwards said, flipping switches to power down the ship completely. The rear ramp descended, and the team of 2 medical ratings and a doctor rolled 2 gurneys out to be met by other medical personnel of the ship now carrying them. One gurney carried the unconscious Marine they'd pulled out, and the other a sealed sleep tube with a sheet strapped tight over the observation glass. Watching as the gurney rolled away out of the hangar, Anders and Macmillan looked on with sadness. "Cheer up," Edwards told them as she carried her 2 packs down the ramp. "That guy's only alive because you 2 couldn't mind your business." They both let her levity go because they knew that she knew they wouldn't sit out a fight, especially one where Marines were at risk, but their sadness was more for the fact that the Marine was going to keep suffering for a while because he was far from out of the woods, and that was the curse they'd given him by saving his life. "Poor bastard," Anders said. Before any response could come, a female NCO with 3 chevrons under crossed anchors approached, looking the 2 men up and down for any indication of rank. When she saw none, as none of the operators wore their rank unless in formal dress uniform, she was left with the choice of ordering them around or acting like they could order her around. Edwards also didn't wear any rank badges, as she was deployed in civilian clothing, but the obvious fact that she was a servicewoman and pilot made her an officer. The petty officer from the Buenos Aires settled on the fence by being polite, but making her suggestions sound like they were non-negotiable. "This way, please," she said, stopping by the hangar door as a Marine in camis kept his hand down by his side near the grip of his holstered Mark 30. "You'll be confined to quarters, the galley, and the head for the duration of the journey back to Midway," she told them. "Just the way it has to be. Sorry." She wasn't even one bit sorry. All 3 of them knew that, but the dangerously jealous level of secrecy they encountered when traveling on a stealth vessel was nothing new. The people aboard couldn't contact home, couldn't receive email or access a comm channel unless they were designated on shore leave, because the purpose of those boats was to remain untraceable and not advertise their presence with a wideband "Hey Mom and Dad, hail" coming from them. "Fine by us," Anders said, switching his ruck from one shoulder to the other. They were shown to an empty cabin about the size of a public bathroom with 2 bunks on either side of a space not large enough to fit a third. Their packs went on the top bunk on the left side after all 3 had dug into them for another layer, as the boats always ran cold to minimize the chance of a heat spike alerting a potential enemy to their presence. They weren't so cold it was dangerous, but cold enough to be uncomfortable until they grew accustomed to it. It was like going on vacation somewhere warm and heading home only to step off the transport and feel like you were inside a freezer. Head is 2 doors aft on your port and galley is 1 deck up. Everywhere else is off limits and your assigned DC is the hangar bay you just exited. Questions? The petty officer asked, looking at all of them in turn to be sure they understood their limitations and damage control expectations should they encounter trouble. Medical bay, Anders asked. Off limits unless you are injured, in which case you will be escorted there. Y'all stay shipshape and we don't have a problem. See you in 8 days when we hit Midway. Chapter 9. Barton, Midway Station. My first thought when I came around was that the deckhead I was staring at was not the one I'd been staring at back in the medical bay of the carrier. Specifically, this one was painted black, while most things on the forthright were painted a kind of light gray that needed a lot of cleaning. With a crew that size and a company of Marines aboard, cleaning was a big part of everyone's lives. My second thought, one which took a few seconds to kick in, was, holy fucking shit, I heard everywhere. I let out a strangled cry like a wounded animal and tensed up so hard I thought I was going to either shit my pants or pass out again. I heard shouts and people running over to me before a warm feeling went down my spine and relaxed me more than that first beer after a deployment. I want him under. We can't keep him sedated this way for a week. It's not safe. A voice said. Dark, I said, only I didn't say it. I kind of went, blah, because my lips weren't responding, and instead of words I just let out a string of drool. I didn't know what the hell they'd given me, but I was pretty sure the rest of the squad would try it on our next shore leave just for fun. We'd probably have a sedative-powered football match in the barracks and trash the place, before spending all our leave on a full redecoration out of our own pockets. Then, naturally, the first sergeant to come in would make us watch him trash the place all over again. You don't have a squad, idiot. They're all fucking dead. My brain told me, adding emotional pain to go with everything else. Tube is prepped, someone else said. I tried to lift my hand to tell them I'd be okay, that I just needed a little time to wake up, but my hand just flopped off the bed like I'd misjudged and given it too long before attempting the old stranger technique. The sedative should last, the first guy said again, his voice sounding slower than it should. They lifted me up, which was weird because I felt like I weighed a couple tons, and lowered me into a sleep tube. I knew it was a sleep tube because literally nothing else in the galaxy feels like that, unless they planned on burying me in a coffin, that was. The gel that pulsed to move my muscles felt wet, which made me think I'd pissed my pants, and that padding pinched my shoulders in, like I was the last guy in an elevator who should have just waited or taken the stairs. I tried to talk again, but nothing happened, not even drool. Then a mask was held over my mouth and nose, and I was out. Corporal Barton. Corporal Barton? Ah, I croaked, my eyes still closed and my mouth so dry I felt like I'd never be able to swallow again. Corporal Barton, you're in the hospital wing on Midway Station. You were injured on deployment and require some surgery, so you just lie back and let us help you out, okay? A woman in scrubs said as she leaned her face over mine to give me a front row view right up her nose. I know. I tried to say, not sure if the sounds came out right because my mouth still felt numb and my ears felt like they needed to pop. What I experienced was worse than the usual fogginess coming out of a jump sleep, and I credited whatever meds they'd pumped me full of. I worried that I was banged up worse than I thought, because if she thought I didn't know where I'd been and what the hell had happened, then I must be in worse shape than I thought. I fell back on following orders and closed my eyes, because my life in the Combined States Marines didn't often include being paid to sleep. When I opened my eyes again, I couldn't figure out where the hell I was or what the hell was happening. There was glass or something right in front of my face, and when I let out a gasp of air, it fogged up so I couldn't see a thing. Lifting my right hand automatically to wipe the mist from my visor, I paused, wondering why my hand felt so heavy and slow moving. Looking down at my hand, I frowned. Now, a few times in my life I'd described something the same as being underwater, Like when I couldn't hear after the explosion on the surface of that dusty dumpster they dropped us on. But this was different. I was actually underwater this time, which freaked me out and made me panic and kick for the surface. "Corporal, calm down," a voice ordered in my right ear, sounding tinny and wrong. I turned to face that direction but saw nothing as the voice snapped at me again. "You're in a suspension fluid to heal. It's imperative that you stay still and don't pull any of the tubes or you could disrupt your air supply." I froze, the fear of drowning being a strong motivator to get a grip of my shit. Suspension fluid?" I asked, guessing that if I could hear them, then they could hear me from the glass bubble my head was in. My fingertips carefully explored my neck and found a flexible seal stuck to my skin as far down as my collarbones, which reassured me for some reason. "My name is Dr. Ransom, CS Naval Medical Corps. I've removed 2 bullet fragments and a handful of shrapnel from you, and you might also feel some soreness to your right buttock and thigh where I took some skin to graft the right side of your neck and cheek," the doctor said. Cool. Ass hair on my neck, I thought. "I have to say, Corporal, your tolerance for basic analgesia is quite high," the doctor said, something in his voice accusatory as the fog inside my bubble cleared enough for me to see a thin guy with hair around the sides of his head, even though he didn't look much over 45. "I'm on a prescription of anti-inflammatories and Sitfu from the company medic," I said groggily, seeing him shake his head in confusion as he tried to work it out. That expression turned into a smile when he got it. "Suck it the fuck up is about right," he agreed happily. "One of my favorite prescriptions." "Hey, Doc, any chance I can get out of here?" I asked, not enjoying floating upright like some alien abductee about to get butt probed. "We're beginning the decanting process now, Corporal. I ask that you stay as still as possible and prepare to take your own weight. It'll be difficult to begin with, but you'll adjust soon enough." I waited, feeling some serious cold when the water level dropped below my chest and the air hit me after however long spent floating in warm water. When it dropped below my waist, I really felt the cold and was grateful they'd at least left me with some dignity, even if it came in the form of a pair of tiny trunks. He wasn't joking about standing up being difficult. It was like getting off a fairground ride drunk and not being sure if the gravity was lighter or heavier than Earth. It was weird. But without the water surrounding me, I felt claustrophobic inside the clear tank. So when the lid was popped, I was close to tearing at the flexible seal around my neck. They sprayed something on it that made my skin tingle as the stuff melted away. That tingling made the panic return quicker because it brought back the feeling of my skin coming off. "You're all good, Marine. Get yourself dressed," the nurse said, pointing at a folded stack of candies on a chair. I did, shivering a little from the cold after being so still for however fucking long I'd been under. The boots were new and stiff, but being dressed again made me feel better. It also exhausted the hell out of me and left me sitting down on the chair to catch my breath as a Marine major and 2 lieutenants walked in. Struggling to my feet, I stood to attention and hoped I wouldn't tip over. "As you were," the major said, sounding pissed that I'd done what I was supposed to do. He didn't talk to me but looked right by me and spoke to the medics. "Is he fit to be released?" "No, sir. We still need to run tests to make sure he's..." "How do you feel, Marine?" he asked, finally looking at me and speaking with a tone that made it pretty damn obvious there was only one way I could respond. "Good to go, sir," I answered dutifully, even if my lips moved at a different speed to my words, so I sounded like I was swearing under oath that I hadn't touched a drop. He nodded, shot a look at the doc that said a swift "fuck you," and turned for the door. I followed, moving as fast as I could without losing my balance, with the 2 lieutenants walking behind me. Not close enough to help me if I fell, but close enough to get a good view of me smashing my face into the deck. The major was pissed that I wasn't moving fast enough, but at least he didn't curse me out for it. He slowed down a little, but I was running out of breath fast and had to lean on the bulkhead to keep going. Just when I thought I couldn't make it, he stopped and gestured for me to enter a compartment. Inside the dingy room was a desk with 2 chairs on the side nearest the door and one very lonely chair on the opposite side. I guessed this would be the part where they tore my story to shreds and made me sign the official version they wanted to get on record. I went around to the single chair and sat, expecting the Major to walk in behind me, but he just shut the door to reveal a guy leaning against the corner. His face was lit by the dull glow from a tablet. Corporal Barton, Michael E., born July 5th. Ha, almost. 2289, on Earth. Don't see that much these days. In New York City, of all places. How is that filthy hellhole nowadays? I opened my mouth to answer, to say that I hadn't been there in a while, but he carried on talking like it was a rhetorical question. Mother is a shipping clerk and father works at the same company. Aw, but they left Earth after you joined the Corps to work together on a frontier sector. Living the dream, huh? Already this asshole telling me details about my life that anyone could find out, but making it sound like he knew what my net browser history contained. I said nothing, not wanting to show him he'd gotten under my skin inside of 10 seconds. Let's see here, the guy said as he flicked through stuff on the screen in front of him and took a seat. He was wearing civilian clothing, but the Army Airborne ink showing from under his rolled up sleeves, and the way he held himself made it clear to me this guy wasn't totally retired. Service record looks clean. 1 niplock for late back offshore leave. I'm guessing there's a story behind that because there always is. He said, sounding bored to the point of being an asshole. There's your civilian criminal record, obviously, but that's sealed. I said before my brain could tell me to shut the fuck up. The guy just smiled, like nothing was really sealed when it came to him. For a jarhead, you've kept your nose clean. I'd expect most of you guys to wash out or get a medical discharge with crotch rot by the time they'd be knocking on the door to sergeant rank, but here you are. He put the tablet down and eyeballed me. I was pissed, and he probably knew it. So tell me, Barton, Michael E., Corporal, CSMC, what the fuck makes you so damned special? Okay, first off, there is one hell of a story behind that ninja punch. I said, talking to the guy in the same manner he was talking to me, because I was leaning heavily on him not being part of any official chain of command. Secondly, my non-punitive letter of caution never went on my permanent record and stayed with my CO, so I don't know what you're reading there, but it sure as shit ain't my service record. Perhaps I'd better start that part over, he said, smiling like he was enjoying seeing me get even a little mad. I'm part of SOG here at Midway. The purpose of this debrief is not to tell you what you saw, but to find out what you really saw, okay? I guess my question should have been, how in the hell did only you make it out alive? I worked my hands into fists under the table and tried to keep my face from showing how much I wanted to punch the asshole in the face. I don't know. I went down after an explosion and the Helameds lifted me out. It wasn't just the Helameds, you know that, right? I frowned, thinking until my brain played back over the things I didn't much feel like going over until the image of crossed axes on an armored shoulder came to me. It was a SOG guy who pulled me out, I asked. 2 of them, actually. They told us what they saw, but they didn't know what went down before that. We're hoping you can tell us. I took a breath and relaxed my hands. I wanted water. I wanted food and a bed, but I knew I didn't have much of a story to tell, so I just spat it out. If you're SOG, then you can read the reports. I have. I want you to tell me, he said. I took a long breath before I spoke, giving him the details short and sharp. LZ was empty. We cleared the east side of the compound, door to door, and got ordered up to the quarry after finding an apparent suicide case behind a barricade. En route, we found the severed arm of an NRC paratrooper. I led a squad into one of 4 tunnels when the shooting started. Then we were ordered to make for high ground. We took fire from the enemy, and the lieutenant, staff sergeant, and another sergeant went down. I ordered a rearguard action and got blown up. Wow, heavy on detail there, Marine, he said without a trace of humor. Tell me about the enemy. There it is, I thought. Do I lie? Are they going to kick me out on a failed psych eval if I tell them what I saw? You've seen the footage, right? I asked, stalling for time and hoping the guy had at least some corroboration of what I wanted to say. Some kind of distortion killed the recording and transmission feeds. That's why I'm talking to you. I took a breath. forgetting the rivalry and the taunts because my mind was replaying something way worse. With my eyes closed, I started to speak again. They walked like they weren't in full control of their bodies, and when they took rounds, they didn't go down. Not unless they took headshots and... And what? He asked quietly. And they had stuff like tar coming out of their mouths. Whatever the hell they weren't people anymore, you know? I said, not sure if I'd just opened my mouth too far and ended my career. And this was the NRC military forces you're talking about? No. I shook my head emphatically. It was the NRC, the colonies, miners, mercs, and civilians. The miners were armed? He asked. No, I mean, not all of them. They just walked with the others like they weren't scared of bullets. Who does that? People who aren't scared of bullets. He answered flatly, saying nothing more and leaving a silence that hung around like a bad smell before he finally spoke. I'm guessing you want to know what happens next, am I right? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Well, the injuries you received would earn a Purple Heart and a discharge with honors. I think the Corps would pay you a generous amount of compensation and you can walk away right now. Only that option comes with a non-disclosure agreement that has some real teeth to it, he said, his lips moving but his eyes not leaving mine. The kind where I get branded a traitor if I repeat what I just told you, right? Lock me up and throw away the key kind of thing. He smiled darkly, the skin around his eyes crinkling like he was enjoying whatever thought he was having inside his head. No. The kind that ends up with kid porn being found on your server and where you take an overdose before your trial. You feeling me, Marine? And what's behind door number 2? I asked, thinking that if that was the carrot and the stick, then there might be another option. What makes you think there's a door number 2? He asked. Because neither of those scenarios involves me staying in the Corps and still signing that disclosure agreement. I told him, forgetting how tired, thirsty, hungry, and pissed I was. What makes you think the combined states military still wants an injured Marine with a mission recall that's pretty indicative of some serious post-traumatic emotional disorder? I laughed. Not in the way that I found what he said funny, but because to me, even though the guy was SOG, it sounded naive. You show me a Marine with more than 5 years service who doesn't have some form of PTED. It was his turn to laugh before he got serious. Fine. You want to know what's behind door number 2? We're going back there, because our guys saw most of what you saw, and right now there's a bunch of eggheads dissecting a guy who was infected by whatever shit that was down there. And where do I fit into that? I asked. Chapter 10. CSS Buenos Aires, open space between Midway and Ascension. The Buenos Aires, given a generous 3 hours to replenish their supplies and run maintenance before they were ordered to depart again, hit a jump lane that took them out of CS-controlled territory and toward the part of the galaxy claimed by the British and Russian powers back on Earth. The contested area had been under Chinese allied territories' dominion 60 years earlier, the Chinese having sailed the furthest from Earth as the gold rush first sparked off, but they'd conceded it to the British in some trade deal that literally left hundreds of thousands of civilians facing the choice between uprooting their lives or living under the rule of a hostile government. That British territory had in turn been conceded or sold off to the combined states sometime during the last galaxy-wide conflict. Approaching coordinates, Admiral, the captain of the boat said. He sounded curt, but that wasn't to say he was angry at his orders. He was well accustomed to doing the shady work of covert transportation, but his prevailing manner was to appear permanently pissed, and having an admiral on board made no difference. Good. Drop us out of the jump lane and maintain stealth. Move us 50,000 kilometers from the exit mark and go silent, she said, reminding him that she had commanded boats like this one in her time before the Admiralty called her up to the command structure of Midway. It was also totally against all manners and protocol for her to give orders to his bridge crew, but he didn't let it rub him up the wrong way. He did enjoy a small moment of satisfaction when his helmswoman turned in her chair to get his nod of approval before disengaging the jump lane phase drive and dropping their boat out of the interstellar currents that carried their ships over impossible distances. "Going silent," she announced, as other members of the bridge crew flipped switches and tapped at glass consoles to put the ship into its quietest mode. Hushed voices passed information for the next 40 minutes. The oddity of this was that it was unnecessary, because a raised voice could hardly carry through the hull to alert any other ships nearby, but something about the concept of silent running made it feel right. "Jump lane active," the officer on the sensor array said. "Ship emerging." "Communications," the Admiral said, again circumventing the captain's authority. "They're broadcasting, identifying themselves as the battle cruiser Khabarov and requesting a response," the officer reported with a vacant expression as he translated what came through his earpiece. "Open a channel to them directly," the Admiral said as she stood and straightened her crisply pressed fatigues. The comm officer tapped at icons and gave her a nod to signify that the channel was open. "This is Admiral Alina Arias of the Combined States Navy. To whom am I speaking?" The line was silent for a second before a drawling, accented English response came through the speakers. "Admiral Arias, I am Major General Viktor Rudneva of the new Russian Confederacy's naval forces. Please accept our invitation to board this ship and discuss the urgent matter your communications spoke of." The voice, be it intentional or a chance byproduct of the accent, dripped with malice. The captain of the Buenos Aires looked at the Admiral, expecting to see fear in the harsh woman's expression, but instead he saw a slight smile. "I am glad you could make this meeting so soon, Major General, but please accept our invitation to come aboard and talk," she said, hitting the return shot with a little topspin like a game of political ping-pong. No, I insist that you be our guests, Admiral," Rudneva answered, his own voice bearing the same level of implied threat as before, only this time tinged with amusement, as though he'd known they were going to play this game all along. "As we both seem to want to be the gracious hosts, how about we meet in the middle? I assume you have a Zook-class shuttle on board?" she said, her investment in the correct pronunciation intense. "And I presume your Patriot-class patrol boat is carrying how you call your runner shuttles, which is compatible with the Zook docking seals?" Rudneva responded coolly. "Might I suggest one pilot and one aide each?" Major General Rudneva strode onto the rear deck of the Admiral's shuttle like he owned both vessels. Strode was the correct terminology in so much that he had to duck significantly to get underneath the rim of the two mated airlocks. "Now we have done how you call measuring our dicks. Shall we agree what we are needing to?" he said, offering a hand to the much smaller Admiral and treating her to a charming smile. He was rough-skinned and bearded, looking more like an old Earth sailor from half a millennium ago than a man senior enough to engage in negotiations with another nation they were mostly observing a truce against. "Major General," the Admiral said, shaking the offered hand, "I'm happy to cut out the bullshit, if you are." Rudneva turned and jerked his head to the officer loitering behind him, dismissing the man without a word. The Admiral, perhaps in deliberate contrast to her counterpart's actions, politely asked the naval commander from her staff to give them a moment alone. "Very well. We are talking down to brass tacks," Rudneva said. "The colony planet is now under the control of the new Russian Confederacy until we have recovered our troops. We will provide your combined states with comprehensive report of our findings. After this, planet will remain under our protection." "How very kind of you, Major General, but call me Victor, Admiral Arias," she said, laying a hint of a slapdown on his informality. "Major General,"
That is truly a kind and generous offer. However, there are two things you have failed to take into account. One, the planet is already under the protection of the combined states government being well within our borders. And two, CS military personnel lost their lives responding to the same distress call your people failed to investigate properly. So we will investigate and provide you with a detailed report of the situation. She glared at him, waiting for him to crack and bend to the threatened might of the combined military power of her nation. To her annoyance, not that she let it show, Rudneva smiled. "This is new word I learned from British," he said in a tone that sounded like she hadn't just fired a broadside past him. "They say to haggle a thing. Do you know this word, Admiral? Haggle? You mean barter, right? No, I do not think this is same thing. You see, the British seem to enjoy this kind of negotiation, but they also want it to end very quickly so that they can complain about the other person to their friends. You say a high number that is insult to me. I say a low number that is insult to you. Then we are both knowing where the other person is starting. Yes? So then I say a lower number and you say a higher number? Arius asked. That's bartering. However you say, but point is that I am not wanting this negotiation to last very long, so I wish to haggle with you. Compromise is to make joint task force and maintain planetary quarantines with equal number of vessels. Arius suppressed a smile at his inability to say the word right in English, wondering why an admiral of 28 years' service found the word vessels so amusing. A joint task force is agreeable to my government, she said, knowing that the only authority she needed was her own, given how far from Earth space the planet was. The fact that the colony miners were all presumed dead made any feedback on losing the planet, either to whatever had happened down there or to the NRC, negligible. This is good. You see, we are haggling like the British do. Now, big question. Who is in charge of task force? Chapter 11. Barton. It turned out that my posting involved a strict regimen of good meds and a whole lot of sleep.